one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The next item is instructions on exiting the building in case of emergency and review of technology options.
Great, thank you. So for those in the room, there are 2 doors on either side of the rear of the auditorium. You can go out either one and turn right or left to get outside. For those participating online, if you are interested in making comment, you can message me in the chat and we will call on you. Or you can just turn your cameras on and we will know you would like to participate. We are not monitoring the chat for content. Thank you.
All righty, thanks. Item 3 is the agenda review. Are there any additions, deletions, or changes in order of the agenda items? Seeing none. And by the way, Tom Chittenden will be here in about half an hour, 45 minutes. He had a conflict. Okay, so seeing none, we'll move on to item 4, comments and questions from the public on that are not related to anything on the agenda. Is there anyone who is here in person who wishes to do that? There are a couple people, but all right. Is there anyone online who wanted to make a comment? All right, seeing none. We'll move on to item 5, counselors' announcements and reports on committee assignments and the manager's report. Megan, do you want to start?
I don't really have anything to report.
Okay.
No.
All right. Matt?
Sure. I just would like to report that had multiple conversations with staff and the Committee for Common Area of Dogs, and we'll continue to have that conversation tonight. So it's more my neighborhood and Tim's neighborhood, but there was a concern about the movement of construction traffic on Summerfield Lane and Cider Mill Drive. Paul Connor stepped right up and provided an explanation to the residents, and just another example of great customer service that we have, explaining why those trucks were there and making sure that they didn't continue on that path. Green Mountain Transit Authority, I've been appointed chair of the operations committee, so I think they're going to double my pay. Just kidding,
Yeah,
0.
yeah. Well, they're going to double your pay,
Yeah.
right?
And VTrans has been awarded, speaking of Green Mountain Transportation Authority, VTrans has been awarded $9.2 million for the purchase of low and zero emission vehicles, and GMTA is going to use that to purchase more electric buses, so that's exciting.
Excellent.
Great.
And that's it.
Good. Okay. Thank you. Tim?
Yes, I was the only city councilor to attend the grand opening ribbon cutting of the Szymanski pickleball, resurfacing, painting, and the basketball courts. My sister from Canada, Teresa, was here for a few days, and I took her down there, introduced her to Holly and Adam, and took pictures, lots of pictures. And what a great facility, and what a really exciting group of people out there just whacking the heck out of that ball. They were like, Tim, come play. I'm like, no, first of all, I'm not dressed for it, and I don't have the right shoes for it, and I don't want to get sweaty right now because it was a warm day. So really glad to see that work by Recreation and Parks, and nice facility, good resurfacing and painting. I also went to the bridge design meeting last week.
Oh, good. Thank you.
And unfortunately, they decided not to adopt my idea, which was a huge square topsail-masted schooner with huge metal masts and, sails as you come up the interstate. Yeah, but they said no, it wasn't affordable. But I thought I'd try at least, and I talked to the lead designer, and she said no. I also visited Portsmouth, New Hampshire over the weekend, Labor Day weekend, and happened upon the Portsmouth Prescott Park Arts Festival, and they had a huge sound stage built with lighting, and the park was filled with probably 1,000 people, and a folk band from Canada called Wild Rivers was opening their American tour there. And it was really, what a great crowd, what a great night. We just stumbled upon it because we heard music, and we just walked towards it and then found that. And it was a really nice small vacation to spend there, as well as going to the beach and having 2 good beach days. But on our way, we witnessed and were part of the problem that VTrans has at the Richmond merge site, where in 89, requires people to go into the left lane ends. You have to merge to the right side. And on both ends of that area on Friday of Labor Day weekend at 4:20 when we were traveling, we saw people blocking the middle lane, straddling the line to prevent people to use the left lane to fill up both lanes to get to the merge point. And that's why I saw a VT Digger article saying that the VTrans is going to have to reevaluate that area and then ask people to do the zipper merge. So I just want to ask the
Every
general
other
public.
one? Is that the zipper
Yeah. Use both lanes. If you use both lanes to get up to the merge point and you're going nice and slow, guess what? You can alternate, and then you only take up half the distance that you normally would if you didn't fill one lane. And then there's less animosity, and I just want to urge everybody be courteous on the highway at merge sections and use both full lanes. And be nice. That's all I want to ask.
Well, I think you should do a PSA for
I think I just did.
V-Trans. Well, but let's get it spread more broadly. Pardon me? Oh, CX, you can use it as a little
Let's FFF.
spot somewhere else. Yeah,
Fox.
that's great.
Fox. Yeah. Anyway,
So,
that's all I have.
Well, I'm glad you went to both those events because I would have, because I love pickleball and I'm really interested in the bridge, but I was gainfully employed, I guess, in Texas, welcoming to this world a new grandson. And so everyone is doing really well. And it was just always fun to see. It's my youngest daughter, it's her first child, and she's just such a natural mother. It was just lovely to watch and oversee. So it was great. So that's where I've been for the last 2 weeks. So I haven't done much except meet with a number of people about the dog park and a few other conversations. But Jesse.
Thank you. So I have a number of updates tonight. One, I shared with the council earlier today the announcement from UVM that they'll be investing $22 million in housing here in City Center. It's about 500 beds, 295 new homes on this block right next door to City Hall. This is a huge commitment of UVM to our downtown, and I think really capitalizes and realizes some of the success and hard work this council has taken over the last decade with the community support. So I want to thank them for their investment and look forward to bringing those new homes
Can I ask a question?
to the city.
Is that considered nonprofit and lower property tax than market rate housing?
No, it's a good question. It will all be market rate housing. It will be majority owned and operated by Snyder Braverman or their entity, with UVM having access to those units. So if they're not full with graduate students, staff, faculty, residents, they will go out onto the open market. So it'll be market rate housing.
That's probably unlikely.
And they will be maintaining the required commercial space on the ground floor with some interesting partnerships in the works.
Looking forward to that.
Yes, I
Yeah.
think that was terrific news. Thank you.
It's also, just to preview, very good news for our TIF bond vote on town meeting day, to be able to demonstrate to the community that this community vision is really being realized in advance of that final TIF bond vote. Some comings and goings on the staff level. On September 1st, our senior firefighter Roger Pigeon retired after 20 years. And we had a lovely event celebrating his service. And we also welcomed Marty Gillies to the role of Development Review Planner with the Planning and Zoning Department. So he's very excited, interesting young person, and I think
What
will
is
bring a
his
lot
first
of
name
energy
again?
to the team.
Marty. Marty Gillis.
I also want to thank Tim and our neighbors who attended the Bike Ped Bridge community stakeholder meetings over the last week. We are accepting community feedback through September 12th. So out here in the hallway, there are Post-its and surveys. There's also a QR code on the website that folks can go to look at the 3 different options and provide their comments. So again, that will be open through September 12th. And then on November 7th, the architecture team will be here to present the final recommendation to the council. As you likely have seen, Dorset Street is being repaved. that may be creating some consternation for folks. They were out there as of this morning. They will be out there for the next couple of weeks. The bad traffic days right now are scheduled to be today and tomorrow as they do the milling, and then the 29th and the 30th as they do the paving. Between that time, there will be interruption, but it won't be as much lane incursion. And then a couple other upcoming events I just want to make sure is on the Council and Community's radar screen. On September 20th at 5 o'clock, the Public Art Committee will be having their long-awaited dedication of Goose Park. So it's 5 o'clock on the 20th. Apparently it's called Gooses. That's the name of the park. The state auditor will be here next week, September 12th, to kick off our next TIF audit. That will be a big, heavy lift for some of our staff for the next couple of months, but a very important part of the TIF oversight process. Additionally, VEPC, which is the Vermont Economic Progress Council, will hold their monthly meeting here on September 29th and then tour the district. So that's exciting to be able to welcome them in. Violet Nichols and I from the school have been working on the school impact fee request, and I anticipate that coming to council for future consideration in October. And then finally, just confirming what I said in an email earlier today, that on September 27th at 7, we will be holding the joint Planning Commission and Council meeting about the comp plan values. Sorry, Tran. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to the the consent agenda. We have 3 items: the disbursements, ratifying an execution of the Third Amendment to the closing assumption and priority agreement for the Farrell Street Senior Housing Limited Partnership, and authorizing the city manager to execute and submit to the city clerk for recording a replacement irrevocable offer of dedication related to Garden Street.
So I'll move that we approve the consent agenda.
Second?
Is there any discussion? Okay, all those in favor then signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. None opposed, it passes 4-0. Item 7 then.
Can you?
Oh, we gotta
Paul
wait,
is
don't we?
here, but I just texted him, and I think he's probably still upstairs. Do you want to go to 8
Sure.
quickly, and then
Is that okay
come
with
back to
everyone?
7?
Yeah.
We'll move on to item 8 then, receive an accounting of the current American Recovery Planned Act, ARPA, the allocations and expenditures, and Andrew's going to take us through that.
Sure. Thank you, Helen. So we thought before we had the larger discussion about ARPA planning for the future, it would be a good time to take a look back and see, just give you an updated accounting of what we've spent and what was allocated so far. It's outlined in the memo to you that we've already allocated a little bit over $2.5 million of the 5.5 that we initially received. The very first allocation that council took was a little bit over a year ago, and that was to fund 3 unfunded positions in the FY22 budget. At the time, we gave you numbers based on if we filled those positions immediately. What ended up occurring is we had one position, particularly the finance support, the finance officer role, that did not get filled until sometime in March. We also had the new city planner that was unfunded that also didn't get filled until later in the year. So we had some salary lag savings in the FY22 allocation. What we're recommending we do with that savings is, number one, in the FY23 budget, council allocated $310,000 for a new ambulance. The numbers, as we've seen throughout, again, this was, we budgeted this back in October, seen significant cost increases, and that number came in about
$58,000.
So yeah, 58,000 more than the approved amount. So what we're suggesting is that council, by formal action, just to make sure when we are audited for under the ARPA spending, that some of that salary savings from FY22 be allocated for that purpose. Also, when we came forward with the initial projections for the salary for those 3 unfunded positions in the out years, we were looking at somewhere around 3% cost of living increases. As we've seen, both with a collective bargaining agreement that was unsettled at the time and CPI since then, that final settled number was a good deal higher than that. We're probably looking at similar increases for next year. So our recommendation is to use the remainder of the salary lag savings in FY22 to be placed towards those additional increases for those salaries. So there's a formal recommendation to sort of officially make those changes in your packet.
Thank you. I certainly appreciated being reminded of how we had spent that money. And clearly, when you read through it, I mean, we really used it exactly the way it was designed to really make sure that our staffing remained as robust as possible. So I really appreciate that. Are there any comments or questions? Tim?
One question is, why is the ambulance so much more expensive? I know that lots of things are more expensive today. I'm just curious why that is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it was
Well,
supposedly budgeted
14%
310, and it kind of came in at
increase.
368. You know.
Yeah, I mean, from what I understand, there's such a we're not going to even receive the ambulance for another, I think it was 18 to 20 months from when we ordered it. There's just such a backlog. There's such a so much more demand than supply right now.
Oh, okay.
If I could just add,
Yeah.
Andrew's absolutely right. It's a really interesting thing that's happening with municipal fleets right now. They have almost all municipal vehicles have between a year and a half and 2 year waiting list to receive them because they weren't generated for a long time and parts weren't generated and whatnot.
Right.
So it's something we need to think about as we're doing future budgets. If we're budgeting for a vehicle that we're not going to receive into the future, how do we account for that within our CIP? It's a
Yeah.
interesting COVID response that is kind of new to the field.
And anticipate perhaps if it's 2 years out, a slightly larger cost.
Question about all of our city vehicles. Are any of them moving toward electrification? Yeah.
Yeah, we're trying where there are efficiencies with moving to hybrid vehicles. There's sometimes a little bit of a higher cost. We're taking all of those opportunities that we can right now. We're also, Lou Brizzi is working with Public Works on our fleet replacement plan, and sort of ensuring that those vehicles operationally that we can have electric and makes most fiscal sense to be electric now that we do it sooner rather than later. That includes building out charging stations at DPW, which he's working on right now, to make sure that we have the infrastructure needs to make that happen.
And I mean, I would just be curious to know, and I don't know, so I ask this truly from a place of not knowing, because the acceleration is very, very strong on electric vehicles. Would emergency vehicles ever become electric?
So what I understand as far as the big vehicles, fire trucks, plow trucks,
Or police cars?
yeah, ambulances. Those larger vehicles, the technology isn't quite there yet. There are some pilot programs out there. Just the cost is 2-3 times what we'd see for a typical vehicle. But on the police side, I know Richmond is doing a pilot project with a Tesla. Chief Burke's been very engaged with his partners to sort of talk about how they're functioning operationally. And as of right now, he does not believe that the technology is there, but it's getting there.
Right. Thank you. Thank you.
And I would think that, I mean, just there, for example, I think there's one of those big Ford trucks. It's all electric, but it's 2 years out to get one. I mean, or 3. I mean, you can order it, but you can't get it for quite a while.
But you can plan.
You can plan on it, yes, but in the interim, if you need a truck, you may have to purchase, a gasoline model or diesel model or whatever they buy that would be relatively new and not need to be replaced for many years. It's just another one of those, yikes, they're not there ready to just buy and have delivered immediately, which makes it hard.
But the city does have a Clarity right now, right? At least one pluggable hybrid vehicle?
Yes.
Is that just the only one that we have?
Yeah, we just have the one, fully electric vehicle. That's a city staff vehicle here.
Which vehicle is that?
That's the we call her Evie. Right?
Is it the Honda?
The Honda, yes. Yep.
It's fully electric or it's hybrid electric?
I believe it was fully
It's
electric.
is it a
vehicle.
Clarity? Is that what it's called? Or?
I'd have to, I'd have to
Okay.
get back to you, yeah. But I do know, I mean, the chief has put in his order, Chief Burke has put in his order for the hybrid police cruisers that are coming in. I know those will go a long way, particularly with, idling is such a main source of carbon emissions for our fleet. So that'll go a long way on that front.
Thank you very much.
Great. Okay, so I would entertain a motion to accept this recommendation of the use of the unexpended funds.
So moved.
And I'll second, and it's approving the reallocation, yeah.
Yes, do you want to just read the motion?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Go
Yeah,
ahead, Matt, you
Go
made the
ahead, Matt.
motion.
It's at the,
I have it right here unless you don't.
Go ahead.
I move to approve the reallocation of FY22 unspent ARPA funds as presented to pay the overage on the new ambulance purchase and beginning in FY23, the balance to fund salary variances in the 3 refunded city staff positions.
And I'll second.
okay, is there any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
So that passes. Good, well, thank you.
So we can pause here so we can go
So
back
we
to
can
this.
go back to item 7, and that is receiving the LDR 2205 and 2206 proposed amendments to the LDRs for the expansion of transfer of development rights, program applicability, and legal technical corrections, and considering setting a public hearing for October 7th, 2022 at 7 p.m. So,
Howdy.
People.
Paul Connor, Director of Planning and Zoning. I think you all know me. That was a joke.
do you still have a beard, though?
I do still have a beard.
Oh.
Yeah. So I'm here tonight to, as the warning describes, to present to you for your consideration of warning a hearing on an expansion of the Transfer Development Rights Program. As you may recall, this was a study of the program was one of the 4 studies established by City Council as part of interim zoning. The task or the committee that worked on that did complete their work during interim zoning. The Planning Commission received it, and they identified a series of sort of 4 policy priorities that they would focus on. Ultimately, they decided that the timeline was critical on the planned unit developments and the environmental protection standards, and so provided those to you first, provided the general PUD as a cleanup second, and then this is the third piece of the puzzle. What it essentially does is it retains the same functionality in the southeast quadrant. There are no policy changes taking place there. There were some shifts in the round of amendments adopted at the beginning of 2022 around how much land is in the Natural Resource Protection District versus the other ones, which shifted a little bit the sending and receiving areas, but there's no policy changes in the southeast quadrant from this round. What this enables is more receiving areas, so more market opportunities to use TDRs, specifically targeted to our higher density residential and mixed use areas. So largely the Shelburne Road corridor, lower Swift Street, lower Allen Road, parts of Kennedy Drive. The Planning Commission intentionally chose not to tackle the lower density residential districts, understanding that identifying how, whether, in what manner to explore any infill in those areas is a pretty substantial community conversation, and at the same time, identifying opportunities along the Shelburne Road corridor would not necessarily be the same kind of community conversation. So that's why they just chose to do this first. What it does is along the Shelburne Road corridor in the C1 and the C2 districts, and a little bit of Williston Road near the intersection of Kennedy Drive, it allows for essentially unlimited density from the current cap of 12 or 15 dwelling units per acre up to with the purchase of TDRs an unlimited amount. What does cap it, and this is important, is the building bulk remains the same.
The building what?
Bulk, so the height, the
Oh,
size.
okay. Thank
So
you.
part of the discussion that the Planning Commission had was today along Shelburne Road, let's say somebody could come in and they'd say, I'd like to build a 5-story office building. And they could do that. They could also build a 5-story residential building, but there could only be 15 homes per acre within that building. At some point, we reach the point where there's more building available, and the artificial cap is on the housing itself. So this removes that artificial cap and says you still have your 5 stories, you still have your maximum lot coverage, your minimum setbacks, but you're not artificially held back on the number of homes that you can put in that space. So that's essentially what this does. In the medium density areas, Allen Road District, Swiss Street District, that are both sort of a transition into other parts of the city, and along Kennedy Drive, it caps the density increase at a 50% bonus, which is the same as the inclusionary zoning maximum that if you chose to provide more affordable units. So it's an either or in this case. So you could choose to, once you've met your minimum affordable, you could choose to make more affordable or to purchase TDRs. It creates a little bit more flexibility for folks to look to what they want to do. The other changes in here are technical in matter. I'm happy to go through them, but they're little technical corrections.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Paul. That point that you last made was really important, and I want to make sure I understand it.
Sure.
So, someone purchases TDRs in order to increase their density in the new receiving areas.
Yeah.
The 15% inclusionary or affordable housing requirement is based on the new TDRs. The increased density allowed by the TDRs, or is that 15% based on before the TDRs are purchased?
The 15% is based on the underlying, but on the. Hang on, I have to think about the math on this.
If it's a what was your example before? A 50 unit
units purchased via TDR do not pay for inclusionary.
Say that. I'm sorry. Say that one more time. They do not.
They're bonuses. So it's based on the base number of dwelling units that you put in, not the additional that you buy via TDR. So if you bought 10 more homes in TDR, you don't then also have to have them be a portion of those be affordable.
You do not?
Got it.
Do not.
So,
Do not.
So in other words, you are not required. Let me say it one more time. Make sure I have this right. You're not required to purchase. You're not required to build more affordable housing if you purchase TDRs in order to expand the density on that new receiving
Correct.
site.
So once you've right,
You can if you want, though.
We could,
you
build
of
it all
course
if
you
want.
can always do
Required to.
right. Correct.
Okay. I think I got it.
And I just had a quick question. Looking at the orange part,
Yes.
now is some of that the O'Brien development? I just am curious if it sort of will
Orange part.
apply going forward to them.
So it does include portions of the O'Brien Hillside neighborhood, which is largely built.
Yes.
Well,
Well, there's a good, yeah.
right. In concept, they could make use of it, but it's drawn based on the zoning district, and so we weren't. The Planning Commission wasn't adjusting zoning districts.
Okay.
They could conceivably take advantage of it, but they, in the Hillside neighborhood, have essentially laid out all their final plans.
Okay. And if they did decide to do that, would they have to go back to
That would be an
the
amendment to their.
DRB to
Yeah.
say, hey, we want to build 50 more because we have these?
Yep,
Okay. So they potentially won't, but
but they
they
could.
could.
Yep, just
But
as
it doesn't include that. Okay.
Yep, just as any other neighborhood that is built or mostly built, like Farrell Street or something like that. There are portions. The neighborhood along Farrell Street made use of some office space, for instance, as part of their total area. They could convert some of that office space to housing now because they had maximized all of their affordability, all of their dwelling units before, counting the office space, so they could now, in theory, convert some of their office space, for example.
Okay. So it would,
Go ahead.
it would not increase how many individual office spaces? Because I saw that commercial districts were included, so I just was, one of my questions had to
Right.
do with how that was going to
So
happen.
one of the sort of oddities of our regulations has been that, as I was describing before, we have a maximum building size, a maximum height, a minimum setback, lot coverage. There is no cap on the amount of non-residential. It's just whatever you can put within that space. On the residential side, however, there is this supplemental artificial cap that goes alongside the maximum size of the building. So this essentially removes that to allow for, if that entire building could have been office, that entire building could be residential now.
I see. Okay. And the other question I had to do with, did you discuss incentives with the Planning Commission? The cost versus the revenue.
The Planning Commission did discuss a couple of different ways in which they could adjust the market. Mm-hmm. So, for example, they the big one that they discussed was, could one, in certain zoning districts, let's say along Shelburne Road, have one TDR count for 2 or maybe even 3 dwelling units. So you buy one TDR, you could build 3 homes with it, which would essentially say that in that district, it would potentially tip the market to invite somebody who's thinking about buying a TDR to buy it and use it there instead of somewhere else. They ultimately decided that there's a fair amount of unknowns about what impacts this will have in the market. It's hard to know until people start using it. And they felt that they could always adjust it upwards if they felt that there was an advantage to the city to making a transfer development right worth 2 homes in a certain part of the city, but it would be very difficult to turn it backwards if they had essentially overheated it. So they decided to just have it be 1 to start with, see how it goes.
Okay, all right. How much per TDR is the going rate?
I can say prior to 2020, they were ranging somewhere in the neighborhood of $10,000 to $13,000 per unit. Mm-hmm. I couldn't tell you what, just like I couldn't tell you what a home goes for now, I couldn't tell you what a TDR goes for. The markets are all sort of all over the place right now.
Thank you.
Sure.
And just for some clarity for me in terms of the TDRs, once you sell one, does it is it included in your deed so that the next purchaser of your home and your 40 acres or whatever it is can't resell it and keep?
That's correct. So what goes in the land records associated with your deed is it's technically called a density reduction easement.
Oh, okay.
And so you have, there's a plat, there's an actual physical drawing of the physical area that you have sold it from.
Okay.
And then the easement essentially says that you have given up the ability to develop this for X purposes. It may still be used by the landowner for agriculture and silviculture and general enjoyment, but not for development purposes.
So they're not selling a undevelopable plot as a TDR, like a wetlands or something that you
So
couldn't develop
one of
anyway.
the changes that took place in February of 2022, the prior round of amendments, was that density is calculated based on the developable land,
Okay.
excluding wetlands, and the same thing now therefore applies to TDRs. So that was one of the other recommendations that had come out of the TDR committee.
That is law. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. Matt, did you have a question?
He's already gone. Yeah, let him go. I did, but I'll let him go first.
Well,
So-
you're younger. You can remember it. Tim couldn't remember his questions. We got to have him go right now.
He's right after you.
So that plat you're talking about has to be filed. That would require the seller to do a survey?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. It does have to be surveyed per state law, and it goes into the land records just as any other survey would, and is recorded permanently with Donna and Company.
Okay. So then thinking about how this would work if somebody wanted to build a housing, let's say in the reddish zone on Shelburne Road. They had a certain number, they had some land, a certain number of acres, which means they could only build a certain number of units. Depending upon what the average size of that unit might be, they might have a footprint for their building that might not reach the setback rules or reach the height limits either, right? It might be smaller based upon whatever they wanted to build. But by buying TDRs with no limit in that no maximum density, right, they could build out to a full, all the setbacks to the maximum height, and they could conceivably have really tiny apartments, right, if they thought they could sell them, right, or rent them, correct?
Correct. There's nothing in the regulations that says that units need to be of a certain number of bedrooms, et cetera. It does say that your inclusionary dwelling units have to have the same average number of bedrooms as your market rate.
Okay.
But it doesn't say that you couldn't do all one bedrooms, for
Okay.
example. The Planning Commission did discuss that and talked about the possibility of, is it time in the city to require for developments over a certain scale to say there must be a minimum of X percent 2 bedrooms or 3 bedrooms or something like that, regardless of TDRs, regardless of inclusionary. They were intrigued by it, but felt that that was taking a little bit of a tangent from the purpose of the TDR. But they recognized that there could be that effect on the market. Additionally, looking at a property like the Bartlett Brook Apartments, for example, that was a pretty large parcel in which that was built, and there's now the Seacom Bank in front of it. With the building of that residential building, they used the entire density for the entire property. So had they wanted to do another residential building where the Seacom Bank is, they were not able to previously.
But they could now.
They could under the TDR.
Right.
So that could be a different option, a different choice that somebody makes.
Right. Then my final question so far is in that orange, the orange little area in the southwest corner, which is probably mostly along Allen Road.
Yep.
There is a lot of wooded area in there. Are those known habitat forest blocks that are not to be disturbed?
There is a habitat block along the Shelburne line.
Okay.
And also I think there's a stream in that area too. And so that land would be discounted from the base density and is not a buildable area unless the property is 70% forest, in which case they're allowed to build on 30%.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
And so each I'm sorry, Matt, go ahead.
Oh, Paul clarified it. Thank you. Which is, just to reiterate, the green area, the sending area in the SEQ, that has shrunk because we're no longer allowing you to sell TDRs in the NRP if it's on your land, right?
The NRP physical area itself grew a little bit last winter, a little bit in the Highland Terrace area, a little bit around the Great Swamp. It's a physical area.
Right.
The number of TDRs available has shrunk a little bit, though, because hazards, which are wetlands, floodplains, etc., are removed from the calculation now.
But just the blue area in the SEQ, which can still be receiving, that hasn't shrunk at all, has it?
That it shrunk a little bit, as I said, in the winter. Last winter, when the NRP expanded a little bit, it took over a little bit of what is the blue.
Okay.
Not a large number, but some number of acres, more than 10 and less than 60.
But obviously the big change is the red and the orange area, which are now able to receive TDRs, and we can increase density in those areas as planned.
Correct.
Got it.
That's the policy change here.
And each TDR buys you, it depends. If it's in the red, you can
Unit, he said.
So it's
Each unit?
always from a housing perspective.
Yeah.
It's always 0.83 acres of conservation. So the 1.2 dwelling units an acre of the southeast quadrant inverted. So that's how much land is conserved for one dwelling unit. Whether that dwelling unit is a single family home or a unit in an apartment building.
Okay.
It's one regardless. A year and a half ago, the council did approve one other use of TDRs, which is to increase lot coverage a little bit. This was something that Bill Shearer had inquired about. And so that's another way that a TDR can be used to increase lot coverage a little bit in the urban design area. But in terms of housing, it's one is one is one. It's,
Okay.
as I said, the commission thought about making it worth more in the Shelburne Road area, and they may still decide, depending on what happens in the market, to do that or recommend.
So to really increase the density enormously, you have to buy a lot of these TDRs.
Yes.
Well, that's what the owners want to have happen, right? The people who own the land who want to sell the TDRs. Which is in part why we did this, right? To make sure that their investment, they were made as whole as they could, even though we shrunk some of the area.
Right. I mean, there's two fundamental purposes of a good TDR program. One is to conserve that which you're seeking to conserve, which in South Burlington is open land, and the other is to identify areas where you might want to, where you would want to see, and you would see a benefit from an increased density.
Alrighty.
One minor correction. I think we talked about October 17th, Jesse. It was listed as 7th, but the second meeting in October for the hearing?
It says October 17th in
Oh,
our.
okay. I think verbally it was announced
Oh,
as
I,
7th,
well,
so
I
I just
may
want to
not
be...
have. Maybe I
okay.
said October 7th. I could have.
Can I ask one more question?
Yes, you may.
So, from past experience on the right side here, on the DRB, we certainly had the TDRs challenged, the legality of TDRs challenged from those that didn't want increased density. The Supreme Court upheld our regulation that TDRs are in fact legal, despite those motions, which is a good. On the other side, has anyone purchased a property that that the prior owner sold a TDR and then tried to develop it and challenge the legality of TDRs?
Can you pose that question again? I mean, on the other side,
So if someone ever purchased a property in which the prior owner sold the TDR, making part of that land, that parcel, undevelopable, and then tried to develop it and challenge the legality of that TDRs that the prior owner sold?
not in South Burlington. I'd have to check in with our legal counsel, and I'd be happy to do
Just
it
curious.
in advance of the hearing of whether there's any case law at all on that.
Yeah.
I would doubt that there is case law in Vermont because there's very few communities that have adopted it, but they can do a broader search also if that's something that councilors would like to have.
I'm just curious if we've had that experience here, because certainly having been through on the Development Review Board, the concerns from our neighbors that didn't think TDRs was an actual policy that could be upheld in court, just wanted to affirm that it has been upheld
Yes.
in court.
It has.
Okay. Well, I would entertain a motion then.
We have a motion here.
Do we have the motion?
I have a
someone
motion.
Make it? Go for
Shall I
it.
read
Go for
it?
it. Yeah.
I move to warn a public hearing on amendments to the Land Development Regulations number LDR 22-05 and LDR 22-06 for Monday, October 17th, 2022 at 7:30 p.m.
Second,
7:30.
that's what's marked.
Is
Oh.
that,
Okay. Our agenda says 7:00, but 7:30 is fine with me.
Whichever you would like.
what do we, is earlier better?
Probably. For Paul, what's your
Yeah.
preference?
Yeah.
Depends what else you're doing on that night.
Well, that's
Well,
true.
let's
All
get it out
sorts
of
of
the way.
Yeah, but
interesting
this
things that
takes
night.
precedence,
Yeah.
right? If we set a, why don't we do 7:00?
So I amend the motion to rephrase it from 7:30 p.m. to 7 p.m. on October 17th, 2022.
And I'll still second that.
All right. Any further discussion?
One
Yes,
small
one
thing.
last thing.
So, I rode my e-bike down to the New England Federal Credit Union on Shelburne Road, and the only bike rack is in the front of the building on Shelburne Road. And nobody wants to park their bike right on Shelburne Road. They want to park it behind where the sliding glass doors are because it's a little safer there. Burlington, South Burlington, we got some bike theft problems going on. So anyway, just making a comment about locations of bike racks should be around the back of the building where most of the foot traffic is. That's all.
Oh,
So,
is
thank
that
you.
a TDR issue?
No,
Oh,
It's an
Nothing to do
amendment
with
issue,
TDS.
Non
though.
sequitur.
Something-
could be an amendment. Yeah, right. We could fix that up too at the same time. Okay. So we have a motion that's been made and seconded. No further discussion. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. So that passes. So we'll
Good.
see you on the 17th, if
We
not
might even see you
before.
before that.
I'm sure it'll probably be before, but on
Thanks, Paul.
something.
Thank you.
Okay. So we are now down to item 9, receiving recommendations. This is so exciting. From the Affordable Housing Committee and Housing Trust Fund Committee to allocate ARPA funds to incentivize the development of affordable housing and to provide direction to staff on the next steps. So Chris Tremblay, Chair, is going to present that.
So just as Chris unmutes, I also do want to call out, we have a number of representatives from both the Affordable Housing Committee and Housing Trust Fund here, as well as I think all of the developer representatives from almost all of the applicants, if you want to hear from the applicants as well.
Oh, yeah, I would think we would. Okay, so is Chris going to lead off and then, okay. Well, welcome.
Ellen, thank you. Hi, thank you for the opportunity to present our proposal to the City Council. So back in April, we first came to you with a statement of values for the RFP. And after your generous approval, we were excited to find that after the RFP closed, we received 6 applications, and the committee was wowed by this response, and also, created the tough discussion of how do you evaluate some strong proposals. And so today, I'm here to talk about our recommendation. In total, the 6 proposals exceeded $3 million in request. And if we were asked to come in around 1 million, some decisions had to be made. But we were excited really by the number and the quality of the responses. So really, after exhaustive committee discussion, we had a half day meeting joint with the Housing Trust Fund to review the applications. We did both quantitative analysis to compare the applications to the RFP and the values that we reviewed or submitted. And then we also had just kind of a larger discussion of how do we want to, how do you make this tough decision of where do you allocate and what's the best outcome for South Burlington. At our follow-up meeting, we unanimously approved with 1 abstention the committee proposal you have in your agenda today. That proposal was ratified unanimously by the Housing Trust Fund. So what you're seeing here today is shows, I think, our dedication and commitment to these proposals. The first one is $300,000 to the Cathedral Square. This is the gazebo property on Wilson Road within the Transit Overlay District. And we were excited to learn about some of the residential rental housing for long-term care staff. For those who are more involved in that area, housing is a challenge for staff, and they're experiencing historic staffing challenges. So that'll certainly meet a need in that community, while it's also redevelopment of an existing property. The next is for $300,000 at Champlain Housing Trust to renovate and convert the Ho Hum Motel on Wilson Road. Again, within the Transit Overlay District, it's a redevelopment, and it serves the largely homeless or transitional housing for folks. And this money will help with upgrades to that particular building. And the next proposal, $500,000 to Champlain Housing Trust and Green Mountain Habitat to develop the Dorset Commons plot that currently is near 577 Dorset Street. And there is a plot of land owned by the, that was owned by the city that became identified as a potential to build affordable housing there. And so we were excited to see that that would have home ownership as well. And so the three proposals here serve within or below the area median income levels that we were hoping for. So we set a ceiling at 80% with the hope that we would be able to really build housing for lower income levels as well. So with these three proposals, that's 34 units of residential care, 28 market and 8 inclusionary rentals just at the gazebo, 16 3-bedroom home ownership opportunities at Dorset Commons, and 21 bedroom newly renovated apartments for the formerly homeless at the hotel. So we're really seeing a broad spectrum of residents that would be served. And it really starts from transitional to rental to home ownership, and it's all within the 80% AMI. We also were impressed with the application from Summit, and they had come in and made a request, and we supported an additional 300,000 on top of the additional 3. So we're asking, first consideration for the first 3, and also recommendation to consider the 300,000 also for the Summit property. As you know, it's a project that has both COTS rentals below area median income and market rate housing. And this is certainly was designated as a worthy project, but we were hesitant to overcommit our allocation. There were 2 other applications that were received. We were, I think, your first reaction is we want to approve everything. And, at 3 million, that's not what we were tasked with. So, there was a prioritization that we made a dedication to shovel-ready projects that would help a broad spectrum of residents in the area. And we're excited to continue to work with the other applicants about future opportunities and engagement about, what can we do to make their proposals a reality here in South Burlington. So I'll pause there. If there's anybody from the Affordable Housing or Housing Trust Fund that wants to speak, by all means. Otherwise, Helen, I'll turn it back over to you for questions. Thank you.
Okay, I have some questions. So I don't see anyone raising their hand to speak. So you were, we had $1 million and you're asking for 1.1. So is the expectation that we would use the money that we have in the Affordable Trust Fund to cover that additional 100,000, or do we pare down some of these proposals a little bit? That's one question.
Sure. There wasn't an expectation of where that gap in funding would come from, whether that's from the ARPA pool. It's our understanding that the Housing Trust Fund money that is available has other applications to consider, and we couldn't speak for that group of.
Okay. So you would like us to increase the ARPA designation for affordable housing?
And we don't make that recommendation lightly.
No, I'm sure you don't. I'm just trying to get the clarity. That's
yeah.
Okay.
So the 3 proposals that were the priority was 1.1, and we're asking for additional consideration that would exceed our original allocation for the Summit property as well, and that would put it at 1.4.
Oh, okay. So there's that as well. Okay. And then I
Yep.
just have a question in terms of the collaboration, I guess, between Champlain Housing Trust and the Green Mountain Habitat for Humanity. Typically, they sell the properties. They use a lot of sweat equity and some of their own workers to build these structures, and then they sell them, and the money kind of becomes a revolving fund of some sort, and they can go out and buy the next piece of property and build them. And is that how this works, or is the sale of these, does that go back to the Champlain Housing Trust to help support this whole project?
So Amy's from.
It looks like
So
we're
Amy
fortunate
can
to
answer
have.
that probably better than anyone.
Yes, thank you. That's what I was going to say.
Hi, thanks. I'm Amy Demetrowitz with the Champlain Housing Trust, and Dave Mullins is here as well, who is with Green Mountain Habitat for Humanity. He can speak to this issue as well. So thank you so much for considering our applications. This project in particular is to, really it's to pay for the infrastructure that's needed to then allow for the construction by Habitat for Humanity of these homes. The cost of the homes, even with the volunteer labor and with some donated materials, we still need to subsidize that sale. And so this ARPA funding will stay with the property as a subsidy to the buyers.
Okay.
David can respond to that as well.
Yeah, thanks, Amy. Together, Champlain Housing Trust and Green Mountain Habitat would make these homes possible. As Amy said, the money is to enable that infrastructure to get done. And then on top of that infrastructure, we would have to raise money and seek out funding for those 16 homes, 8 duplexes, I believe. And so we would raise that money. So what we're doing is leveraging that 500,000 into those 16 homes. We certainly are making good use of those funds. And on behalf of 16 families, I want to say thank you. I think that's a great decision.
Okay, thank you. Other questions by council members?
Yeah, I'd like to know more about where those 16 homes are in the Dorset Commons area. I'm looking at a map of it, and I don't understand
Is it
where
behind
they
City
go.
Hall? Do you recall when we carved out what we were gonna sell or lease to the school department? We had identified a possibility of development back there, and we made sure that the line didn't include that was at least continued to be city land that we controlled, that would be available potentially for development.
But does that extend like behind the fire department and then along between Ocean Avenue and the interstate entrance ramp? Is that what that area is?
I think so.
Okay, just curious.
That's why I think there's some suggestions about some noise mitigation.
Okay.
Because of what? The highway as well as the fire department?
I see.
The school's probably pretty quiet, but.
Yeah.
So it's not on currently developed. It's not the current old city hall. It's the area behind it.
Right.
Yes.
Right. It's new. Yeah.
We had carved that out. We had done a fair amount of, as I recall, a fair amount of site work for, stormwater and stuff, but I guess even more is needed, but we had already invested, I don't know how much, it was a lot of money, wasn't it? Like $1 million or something to bring it up to speed.
I have another comment
Sure.
to make, and I'm not making a judgment. I'm just pointing out the fact that right now, 1510 and 1530 gazebo apartments are assessed at around, around $2.5 million, roughly, around a little less than $5 million total for the two buildings. So if these get sold to a nonprofit, then the assessed value might stay the same, but the tax rate's going to fall for them because they would be part of a nonprofit, just like we have with Allard Square next door, right?
Right, is it like 20% or something? It's not.
80%, I think, and 75
So I believe it's,
the assessed value is what they pay tax.
Is what they pay the taxes.
CHP.
I think so.
Amy did say it's not 20%.
I believe it's 75% of the assessed value, 75%
75?
of the assessed value. Amy, you can correct me if I'm wrong on that. And that's for nonprofit affordable housing.
Okay, thank you.
Is that right, Amy?
It's 70% for owned home ownership units, because those are, they can only be sold for a reduced price. For affordable rental housing, it's a formula based on income. And so I think you're probably right, it ends up being 75, 80%, but it's actually not just a set percentage. It's based on the income approach to assessing property. And that income obviously is restricted due to the rent restrictions.
Is that reassessed every year, or is it just done once at the beginning and then just based upon a normal reassessment schedule that the city undergoes?
That's a good question. I'm honestly not sure about the answer to that. I believe it's done annually, but I'd have to check.
We can figure that out.
Is that
Kim.
true for Habitat as well? Because that's ownership, and hopefully, as you progress in your career, you make more money, but you aren't forced to sell your house because you bought it when
So
you had less
our,
means.
The homes that we develop, the Champlain Housing Trust, and certainly the ones that we do in partnership with Green Mountain Habitat, they're shared equity homes. And so what that means is when somebody does decide they do well, whatever happens in their lives, they decide that they're ready to sell the home, they're going to sell the home for what they paid for it, which is that subsidized price, plus 25% of the increase in the value while they've owned it. So they're making a commitment to sharing the appreciation in their property with the next buyer. And that's why the state decided that it was necessary to restrict the assessed value of shared equity homes, because the owner shouldn't be paying tax on the value of the home that they'll never be able to realize.
Right.
It's really a community asset to assure that there's always affordable homes for sale. And so the assessed value is 70% of the market rate value. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
Are there other questions by the council? How about some of the members? Does anyone else wish to speak in support or opposed to this? Yes, Sandy.
I just wanted to make.
Please tell.
Oh, I have to. Okay. Sandy Dooley, Affordable Housing Committee Vice Chair. The money would pay, there is still stormwater concerns that have to be addressed. So
Yep,
that hasn't been, plus streets or driveways or whatever, and sewer and water. So as I understand it, maybe David and Amy, this money is not for the cost of construction.
Yes, I understand.
Okay.
Yeah,
I just want to make sure that's clear.
thank you. Zeke from Summit would like to make a comment? Or comments? Probably more than one sentence. Yeah.
Hi, Zeke Davison, Summit Properties.
Is the light on at that? Press the little green button. Yeah, there we
not
go.
light enough. Zeke
Thank you.
Davison, Summit Properties. First of all, I just wanted to thank the City Council and the Affordable Housing Committee for the commitment using the local ARPA money for affordable housing. Sounds like you had $1.6 million worth of worthy projects, and with the $1 million initially allocated. And we appreciate the consideration, but just wanted an opportunity to talk a little bit more about our project and hope for allocation of our request as well to be heard by the City Council. It sounds like there were these 4 projects that really fit the RFP criteria that the Affordable Housing Committee was excited about. Including ours, exceeding the inclusionary requirement, really deep affordability, 71 affordable homes we're hoping to build as soon as possible. 20 of those at deep affordability, less than 30% of AMI set aside for formerly homeless. Energy efficiency, we've always exceeded the high performance track. All electric HVAC, and I think readiness and track record. This project was an example chosen by VHFA, who did a press release on the site recently with our congressional delegation as one of these really, truly transformational, impactful projects in the state of Vermont. And readiness, we are, trying to leverage $20 million worth of subsidy already received to build 71 affordable units, all of which are affordable for people less than that make less than 60% of AMI. That's a really low. Our $500,000 ask was a really low per door request to really get us to the finish line. This has been a 2-year process putting this puzzle together. A lot of these awards, VHCB, VHFA, started about 6 months ago. I don't think anybody needs to be reminded about the construction cost environment, the interest rate environment we find ourselves now in at the end of this process of putting together the financing. And it was really this is the last piece of financing we're hoping for to be able to get this project to go this fall as soon as we can. And so as you have the conversations about how we're leveraging resources, how your town ARPA money is leveraging resources, we really do hope you consider including ours in that mix. And I would, happy to answer any questions about this project specifically.
So just to be clear, the final gap of funding you need is $500,000.
Yeah. So this is our.
And then it's a go. You could just start.
Yep, we're pulling construction permits and working to a closing hopefully in the next 4 to 6 weeks. Things happen. I don't want to sit here and promise and say we will, but that is the plan, and this is the last piece of that funding puzzle at $28.5 million already committed for a $29 million project.
Okay.
And Tom Getz is.
Yep.
Tom?
Hi all, yeah, thank you. Zeke really hit the nail on the head. We are finalizing those construction bids and pushing hard towards closing. And it is, when we came back in front of you in April with our initial budgets, we had applications in at that point to all those resources Zeke mentioned: Vermont Housing Finance Agency, Vermont Conservation Board, Community Development Block Grant. We won all of those awards. We got every allocation, and it's the cost increases since then that leaves us with this gap in the project. And Zeke mentioned the energy efficiency. We've gone ahead with an all-electric heating and cooling building. That Efficiency Vermont high performance tier is demanding, and we've met it on our last 2 buildings, and we'll be meeting it here. I think our last 2 buildings that this was based off of had airflow leakage based on the lower door tests of less than 0.07. CFM, that's approaching passive house standards. So, and I think as we've talked about before with the council, we've at this point built over $2 million of offsite solar to offset our use of usage in Vermont for our other buildings that were also all electric heating and cooling. And there's no on-site solar as part of this project, but that commitment continues. So in terms of checking every box of an ultra high impact project that this sort of gap financing helps get to the finish line, it would be, we were very careful not to over request early on when it came, our application came in at about $300,000, $290,000 per unit to develop when we originally came to you. That has gone up to $310,000 per unit to develop. That sounds like a lot, but when you compare it to the rest of the state, the average project, new construction this year, all other affordable housing projects was $380,000 per unit. So we are all still very, very efficient, and we were able to achieve that efficiency by building this dense, high impact project, 94 units. The O'Brien brothers stepped to the plate and are providing, they paid the Act 250 costs, they're paying all the offsite infrastructure, so they're paying for the stormwater ponds, they're paying for all connections off our site, and that's the only reason we're able to come in so low on our cost per unit and able to say that if you can give us this $500,000 to help us get to the finish line, we can leverage this additional 20 million to bring 71 units of affordable housing plus another 23 market rate units to this community, and we'll be ready to start this fall. So we really just appreciate your consideration. And obviously we didn't have the chance to talk to the Affordable Housing Committee ahead of time as part of this process. So I totally understand where the initial recommendations come from, but I do think there's a lot of context that we can provide tonight about this project that was not available as part of that initial application.
I have a question.
Yes. Okay. Go ahead and then Matt.
Thanks. The all electric, does that include the stove, the electric ranges?
Are we electric ranges?
Yes.
I'll have to remember if we did all electric.
Stoves are electric.
All
And-
electric ranges. The only thing that's not electric is the domestic hot water.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask. My second question. Thank you.
Matt?
Yeah, just a clarifying question, I think for Chris, which is in the memo regarding the Summit O'Brien Farms by Summit Properties, and maybe Tom can fill in, but you're saying supported with 300,000 of the 500,000 requested. I'm hearing from Summit that they want the 500,000. What am I? I'm sorry, I'm slow on the uptake here. Are you saying, because we said the number was it's 1.1 million with the 3 other projects and then another 300,000, but I'm now hearing 500,000. What am I missing with the $200,000 gap?
Housing Trust Fund, I think.
The original Summit ask was for 500. The committee, after discussion and consideration of other contributions with the Housing Trust Fund and CDBG funds, the committee came back with a recommendation of 300,000.
Oh, okay.
We're not nullifying Summit's request that they need the 500,000, but it was the consensus of both committees that the 300,000 was our recommendation.
Okay.
I'm confused. The 500,000, there's 300,000, 300,000.
Yeah, we'll get it
Okay, thank you.
clarified, because I asked her, so.
So in Summit's RFP response, they have requested 500,000.
Somebody mute.
Chris, I'm going to mute you for a quick second because I think we're getting a little echo, but unmute. In Summit's proposal, they requested 500,000, 500,000. When the 2 committees discussed, they recommended moving forward 300,000. Summit has also made a request to the Housing Trust Fund, of which there is 150,000 balance through this fiscal year. So and the Housing Trust Fund has met, and members are on here today to think about, we actually have 2 requests to the Housing Trust Fund Summit and another developer who's also not here tonight. So it's not necessarily a public application at this point. So I think the question for council, if you want to support at some level, is do you take the recommendation of the committee and leave that other application with the Housing Trust Fund? Or do you leverage these one-time dollars to Summit if you want to fund at a higher level and leave the Housing Trust Fund for other projects that may come in later this year?
But didn't we already allocate $1 million to Summit?
Mm-hmm.
So that was a CDBG application
Right.
that we co-signed. Those are all our dollars. Those are state dollars.
Those are state dollars, right.
Yeah.
So this is a separate
Separate.
request.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Did that clarify?
Yes, I understand that. So I have, later on our agenda, we have a discussion around dog parks. And I'm just curious of the 3 proposals and now potentially the 4. Do you do anything about responding to your residents who have dogs and provide any kind of area for them? Not a dog park per se that's open to the public, but just, around the building. What
Amenity.
and some amenity, a dog amenity. Is that part of affordable housing lexicon?
Yeah, I think I'll speak for our project. It's within the master plan of the Summit at O'Brien Farms, which does Hillside at O'Brien Farms and the O'Brien Farms master plan, which does include a lot of amenity space, a lot of park space. I think a dedicated dog park. So again, one of the benefits of this project is that it fits within that. One of the reasons it's so efficient is because it's within the scope of that, and that's one of the type of amenities that is included in this development.
Okay. Amy, can you respond to what, if anything, that the Housing Trust Fund does?
Sure. So at our Dorset Commons project, that'll be ownership. And they're duplex units, so people will have their own yards and they can certainly fence off those yards and have their dogs available, to run free in those yards. There is a lot of space, open space at our Dorset Commons apartments. And so there's plenty of room to walk your dog. There's no place for off-leash dogs running
Mm-hmm.
on I have to say on any of our properties.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And then the ho-hum conversion, there is also, common green space, but dogs would need to remain on leash.
Okay. Thank you. Other questions or comments?
Well, I think, oh, go ahead, Tom.
Yes, please.
Sorry, I'm late. My apologies, and if this was already covered, but I'm a little slow on the uptake as well. So I see the 3 projects you're recommending, totaling 1.1 million. The 300,000 for the Summit property is on top of that for a total allocation recommendation of 1.4 million from ARPA. Is that correct?
Yep.
That is correct.
Thank you very much.
But Summit is asking us for another 2.
Okay. 300 plus 200. Understood.
Pardon me?
300 plus 200? Is that what we're talking
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's what they would like. That's what they need is $500,000. And if we want to offer it, they wouldn't say no. So we could use some other ARPA money potentially. And so that's the conversation or the policy decision for us. And then we'd have to use some additional ARPA money for the 100,000. That's the recommendation of the Affordable Housing and Trust Fund.
And Champlain Housing Trust already administers Dorset Commons. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, I do believe that housing is a major need. And I think that this is a very compelling request. So how to provide direction to our staff is we're going to have further discussion on the community survey. And so taking those priorities as well as this as a major priority, I would just like to see the numbers and creative thinking on how we can meet the needs, when we can meet the needs, to just make this the most optimal use of these funds, right? I mean, you've served us well so far.
Yeah.
So I have confidence that we will get there, but it's hard for me to say without a list in front of me to really kind of parse through. But I see this as a really important investment that we could make.
I would agree. We have Ariel wants to speak, so why don't you come forward? Thank you, Zeke.
Hi, so my name is Ariel Jensen-Vargas, and I'm speaking. Is it on? Oh, my name is Ariel Jensen-Vargas, and right now I'm speaking, although I'm also on the Housing Trust Committee, I'm speaking as a member of the Affordable Housing Committee. So as you may have noticed, there was one abstention vote for what we voted on. We voted on all 3 projects, and we were all very excited about all 3 projects. But what happened was after the meeting, I had second thoughts about the CHT Green Mountain Habitat for the Humanity project. And the more that I thought about it, the more I felt that we should not be building residential housing behind a firehouse right off the highway. In my opinion, noise pollution is becoming an increasing problem in South Burlington. I've spent basically the entire year shopping for a condo or a home, and any residence that is not right off Kennedy or right underneath the wings of the fighter planes or right by I-95 is slim pickings, and those are usually mansions. So I'm actually seeing this as an evolving issue, and I'm seeing that we might be kind of offering what might be kind of substandard housing.
Mm-hmm.
Not just affordable, but substandard. If people are living with so much noise pollution and there is one part of the discussion was about mitigating sound pollution on existing buildings, and to me this is a distinction between building new housing where we know that there will be noise pollution. So
I did abstain from the vote after all, but I would do nothing to prevent the project from going through. But I think that is something that the committee might weigh in your deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you. Were you aware that the Kirby houses that are near the airport that were built and we had to give up our, I don't know, support for them to the FAA, and as it turned out, the airport was able to save them, and now Beta owns them. But they were, we were told, were extremely well insulated, and the noise they could deal with the jet noise inside the house, obviously not outside.
And the reason
So
we
they
come
were-
to Vermont, the reason we want to live in Vermont is because of the great indoors, right?
Well,
right?
we are indoors some of the time.
We are, right? We go hiking, we go biking, we go
Sure.
kayaking. We just can't go in our own backyards.
Right.
I think.
Well, I guess I just bring that up because
Yeah,
because
I-
that
that's what I see
construction, as I understand, was really very soundproof as well as energy efficient. But I don't know what the plans are for these houses. So
Yeah,
probably,
I just
and
thought-
I appreciate your
Ultimately, even though I did, it was not well received. The other members of the committee were saying, "Listen, we all agreed to this. What are you saying? We can't just restart from the beginning." And I said, "You're right, but I just don't feel right about supporting that unless we're talking about some kind of sound mitigation, which is then, of course, adding to the cost."
Sure.
The secondary reason was that I was in attendance to a city council meeting where there was an accident for a young person crossing Dorset from the South Burlington High School. There was a discussion about how that section is tree lined and very dark at night. So then now we're talking about more children, possibly other people related to the school living in that complex, more crossing, which I think ultimately would add a cost for the city to make sure that that walkway is safe. So I think that there's some hidden costs associated with that project.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Tim, did you
just,
wanna-
Yeah, I want to point out that I think South Burlington is a little bit unique in the way that it's crisscrossed by Interstate 89 and 189 and 116. And even though Dorset and Spear are not high speed, they can become high speed. So there's a lot of crisscrossing of rather high speed traffic, and Shelburne Road as well. And so, I think almost every neighborhood has some impact by some sort of noise, some more than others. I agree with that. But when I lived on Meadow Road, right, if it was warm out, I had my windows open and there was a south wind, I could hear all the trucks coming down 189 to Shelburne Road with their Murphy brakes on, and that was a lot of noise and it was bothersome. And then other areas you might not have traffic, but then you do have airport noise. So I guess my point is that there probably are very few areas in the city that are totally absent of any noise. Even where I live now, I get the 5:55, the 6 o'clock, the 6:05, and the 6:10 flights. They come up and they come right over the Shelburne South Burlington line, and it's, the GE engines are just whining away. It's like, oh, it's time to get up. It's 6 a.m., right? But you also hear people with, those awful mufflers or
leaf blowers,
modified motorcycles on 116. When the conditions are just right, it just rolls right over, the Edgewood, development and over Butler Farms and comes right across into the Dorset Street area. It's just amazing. So, but I acknowledge what you're saying. Yeah.
I got Emily Krasnow would like to speak. You have the floor.
Hello, can you hear me?
We sure can.
Okay. Well, great. Well, I'm a member of the Housing Trust Committee, and I just wanted to thank everyone. We work very collaboratively, and I'm new to committees. This is my first committee in the city, and I really enjoyed the experience. And I really appreciated hearing everyone's ideas. And as someone who often, almost daily, connects with people who are in dire need of housing in our city and want to stay here, I just can't thank you enough for your consideration and just to the council for recognizing the housing crisis that we're in. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, Carol?
Is it too late to make a comment if I wasn't scheduled?
No, go ahead. No one's scheduled.
Oh,
On this topic?
yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Wait and come up to the.
thank you. I'm Carol McQuillan with Common Roots tonight, but also as a teacher in our schools and just having spent time at our 3 elementary schools, I'm aware that I'm a proponent of affordable housing. I was on the founding board of Green Mountain Habitat in the early 80s and spent 8 years on that board. My concern about affordable housing of this magnitude is, have you, Jesse, and the team talked to the schools about how we will have room for this many more families in our community? Because our schools are at the seams.
Yep.
Is
So
that
that's
a fair question?
Yeah. You want me to
It's
respond?
an excellent question. Thank you.
All right.
So that's a very active conversation happening right now between the council and the school board, and specifically looking at implementing school impact fees to address that needed capacity increase.
Sandy?
Could I say?
I'm sorry. Is there someone?
David.
I think David.
Oh, David, and then Sandy.
Thank you. I would like to address the sound issue. And our houses are extremely well insulated. And the fourplex, for instance, that we built over on Heinsberg Road, that was about 15 feet away from the edge of the road.
Mm-hmm.
And when you were inside that house, in the front bedroom, you could barely hear the cars and trucks that were going by. So today's housing is entirely different than it was 5 years ago and certainly 10 and 15 years ago. So sound inside the home is not an issue. And I would say that if you say for the sake of sound and not the best environment, you won't have this type of housing, then all you will have are those folks that can afford to buy that land and other land in South Burlington. They will put up with that sound, as you can see by the number of homes that are being built there. Evidently, the sound is not a big issue on Kennedy Drive and over that way. So I would hope that you would see the value in creating more affordable housing. I appreciate the concern on sound. I certainly hear those jets myself, and I live in Williston. So, I would just say that this we felt was a great proposal, central for those families getting to stores and schools and everything else. So I believe it's an ideal project for affordable housing.
Great. Thank you. Sandy, did you have a comment too?
Clarifying question for staff. But I can wait for the end.
Oh, okay.
Sandy Dooley, I can just say one thing. I attended the open house of Green Mountain Habitat on Heinsberg Road and was in the upstairs front bedroom, and I was amazed. It has a big window. I was amazed at how little traffic I could hear. Virtually none in that bedroom.
Right.
My second thing is just to address the issue of spending more than $1 million. And when I look at the survey, income disparities, it comes out as very important. It's right up there with childcare. Also, in terms of the results of COVID, housing vulnerability was stated. So I do think that providing more affordable housing is a way of addressing income disparities and the housing vulnerability that people felt because they lost jobs and all kinds of other things during the pandemic. So I think there is one of the things about the survey is affordable housing wasn't one of the options you could check. And so, but I think it fits under income disparities. So that's all I want to say.
Okay, thank you. Matt, you had a
Just to lift up the comment that Carol made, asked a question of staff, is it assumed that these impact fees, which we've previously discussed, up for discussion later on this year, would include those big A affordable housing, what we used to call big A affordable housing, permanently affordable housing, would also pay the impact fees, much like market rate housing?
So that's a policy question for the council when you get the ordinance draft, likely in October. Often a big A affordable housing is exempt from impact fees, but that is a policy decision. And so you will have to weigh that.
Great, thank you.
Just one last comment.
Yes,
So in creating a more affordable housing, right, does that actually have an impact on the demand that we're going to see later in the results of the survey for demands for childcare? I mean, is there a dependence there? So if you had affordable housing, would there be less of a demand for more childcare where there's no childcare at all, perhaps?
Well, potentially you could afford childcare more easily because your housing is more affordable. So less of your income is going to housing, but that doesn't make childcare affordable.
No,
easily
but I'm
affordable
Or available.
or available. I think it's as much.
But they can dovetail a little bit, right?
They do. I think they do. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but
Thank you.
if your monthly costs go down a little bit because of the rent, it can pay for something. Other comments or questions? Yes.
So just from a process standpoint, at some point tonight or at a future meeting, the direction I would like from staff is obviously we're going to have to enter into grantee agreements with each of these parties. So some direction from the council on who to enter into negotiations with, and then ultimately the affirmative vote would be to approve those grant agreements.
But that doesn't happen tonight.
It does. It could. It does not need to.
I mean, we could say go this far,
Well,
and then we'll see if there's additional 500,000 or 300,000 for additional housing from the rest of the ARPA funds, and then you can do the second part. I mean, we've already committed $1 million, so we're $100,000 short with the recommendation by the Affordable Housing Committee.
But we have the 3 proposals, so we could draw up the grantee agreements with a blank line for the amount and decide the amount later on, correct? At least move it forward that way for staff?
Don't you have to negotiate a number?
I don't know. I don't know what the process is.
I don't know. Or granting.
I mean, that's a different kind of direction. I mean, in theory, I guess you could say to us, we only want to spend $1 million, go back to these 3 or 4 applicants and see what you can negotiate for $1 million. That's not how we have framed it to them to date. But you could give us that direction, I suppose.
And all of our trust fund dollars, the 50,000 a year, that's already committed, is that right?
No, so we have $150,000 balance in our current trust fund through this fiscal year. So the 50,000 you allocated this year rolls over, is added to the 100,000 we've previously rolled over, and we have 2 applicants, 2 developers who have applied for those funds, in addition to these applicants.
But we could say, if we wanted to at least go with the 1.1 million, we could use the $1 million of ARPA funds, because that's sort of already been committed by us. $100,000 of the trust fund to go forward. Directions to you is to work with these 3, and then as we get a better sense of where the other demands for the rest of the ARPA money are, we conceivably could come up with $500,000 or $300,000 for the summit proposal.
In what amount of time? Because it seems like they are running against a clock.
Well, all of this money is running against a clock.
Yeah.
I mean,
2026, but they talked about a matter of weeks. That's what I heard Zeke and Tom say.
Well, but what is our timeline to make a final decision on all the ARPA money?
So I think we're a little bit comparing two different timelines. So the timeline on the ARPA money is you need to allocate it by December 2024 and then spend it by December 26. So you have a pretty big runway for that.
Okay.
And I'm going to go out on a limb, developers, so people jump in when I say something wrong. The proposals that the committees have recommended, the three that are fully funded, are in development. So they are projects that are real, but they are not necessarily projects that are permitted or projects that are shovel ready. The Summit project is fully permitted, about to close. So there's a timeline for the ARPA money. There's a timeline for the three recommended projects, and then there's a much faster timeline for Summit, which is a little bit more of a challenge for you all.
Amy has some comments.
I would just say that our ho-hum project is shovel ready. We have permits and we're ready to start construction as soon as possible.
Okay.
Thank you for that correction.
Thank you. So two of them are shovel ready. All right. Well, what's your pleasure, council?
I
think the Summit proposal depends on getting $150,000 from Housing Trust. That was in the proposal budget, as I recall. Maybe correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think that's
So,
Well,
So
maybe Zeke can clarify that. Or Tom, I mean, whoever
Yeah, we
knows.
both, either one. Zeke again, Summit. We have applied for both. So we've applied for $500,000 from this local ARPA RFP, as well as $150,000 from the Housing Trust Fund.
You don't need both.
We do. I mean, that final gap is that $650,000 plus or minus. Yeah.
I misunderstood.
Yes.
Okay,
Apologies
so
if
you
I
need
misrepresented
both.
that.
All right.
Yeah. And to echo Jesse, yes, I think if it's what can the city council do now, and what is likely to happen later if we're able to allocate more to ARPA, our need is pretty present.
I'd love to hear from Chris about the reasoning for $300,000 that you came down on in your committee for the Summit proposal.
Thanks, Megan. So the conversation started at 5, and the conversation was, well, they asked for 5. Why wouldn't we give them 5? The application did pencil in an assumption that the Housing Trust would be awarded $150 and the receipt of the CDBG funds. And there was also discussion of would there be supplemental funds to make up any gap from a third party, such as the landowner, to help close any funding gap. So here we are as a group trying to extend a little bit of money as far as we can. So what can we recommend to make them all happen? Give them the gap financing that they need to move forward to make 177 affordable housing a reality for almost 300 people without delaying or killing the project. So that's how we got to the 300.
Thank you. I appreciate that synopsis.
Yeah.
Tom?
So I'm very attracted to the two shovel-ready projects. The 500,000 to Summit is attractive to me because that's 71 affordable units, and what I'm seeing is going to be a beautiful neighborhood with a dog park. Thank you. That's just great. And then the ho-hum property. So as looking to get a feel from the council, I would be ready to approve both of those tonight. I will say I too was persuaded with Tim's counter arguments on the sound issues related to putting houses right by the interstate, but I just know development well enough to know that if that's a lot more up in the air, I'm fine with considering that at a later date in order to move things along. And I think this council would feel better about putting money towards shovel-ready projects to get the affordable houses starting to be built as soon as possible because of the demand for housing in this area. So that's where I am.
Well, I'll just put an or in for, I appreciate the shovel ready. And when I think about affordable housing, I am so enamored, I guess, of home ownership. To me, that is, when you talk about perpetual home ownership, that just resonates with me more strongly than rentals, because I think the rental market can change. And we don't build enough homes that people can own. I mean, people who own a home have deep roots in the community. They're part of this. It's not a transitional connection. It becomes their community, their school system, their, softball teams or whatever. And that, I don't know, that just resonates more strongly with me than anything else. I think all of the projects meet very important needs. It's hard to, it's like, which half of the baby do we save here? But I would hate to put that off and have that not happen.
I just want us to rehear what Chris Trombley said about having any funds that go to Summit be used as leverage with the owner of the property, and to be able to, have that third party enter in and help reach the gap. Playing with numbers again, I will look at the 300,000 that they were prepared to give to Summit, the 300,000 for the Ho Hum Motel, and then the 500 to the Champlain Housing Trust. I do share with you and the Green Mountain Habitat for Humanity to develop these duplex lots for shared equity homes. I do like that model myself. That adds up to $1.1 million, and it would at least give that green light to Summit to, within that matter of weeks to negotiate further. And within that number of weeks, we can learn what happens as we're deliberating on the remainder of our ARPA funds.
So, can I ask a clarifying question, Councilor? So, is that in the form of a motion, or is that just more of a suggestion? So, just to clarify, so the Cathedral Square was not part of that.
For now.
But for now.
Disabled, yeah.
I would agree with Councilor Emmer.
Then I'll make that motion.
So could you repeat that? So you're saying fund the 300 for the CHT and the 300,000 for the Green Mountain Habitat CHT, not talk about the gazebo property at all.
For now.
For now, and then add in the $500,000 for Summit.
300.
Oh, 300,000. Okay. So now we're still at 1.1.
353. And we
now, that means taking money from the trust?
That would, and it's been through the Affordable Housing Trust Fund Committee. I did sit in on that meeting. They were prepared to support it. Unless, please, I know that Emily's here, unless I'm speaking.
Ariel has her hand.
And Ariel's here too.
That's what we agreed in that meeting, and I don't feel comfortable making a decision on that money without all the members of the Housing Trust Fund Committee here. I'm prepared, I personally.
Can you speak at the mic? They can't hear you.
But the ultimate decider is us, right? I mean.
Yeah, so as a member of the Housing Trust Committee, I am definitely, I find the Summit request very compelling, but I don't feel comfortable moving forward without all the members of the Housing Trust Committee to talk about where those funds would go. And we had not agreed to give that Summit those funds.
And that's why there's just these three proposals here in this memo.
Yeah, I mean, we that's not what we had decided, Ms. Emery. So, yeah, so I don't know where to go from here on that.
Well, it's a council decision.
Yeah. So as far as allocating the housing trust fund money, yes.
What I remember is that it was support for this proposal to go to the city council. Am I incorrect on that?
Yes.
I am incorrect.
Yeah. So how the housing trust fund meeting ended was that they have two proposals in front of them.
Mm-hmm.
They asked a series of questions and have invited both of those proposers into their next meeting to hear the responses to that.
Okay.
Okay. But we still would have the opportunity to reimburse that, or, or use the funds, other ARPA funds, that shortfall. But we don't have to necessarily commit that. I mean, I know it undermines, I guess, the two organizations that had hoped to get $50,000, or maybe they want 100,000. I don't know. Actually, there's 150 in it, right?
I really wish we were all here. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no. But we're trying to move this along in a process that works for the city and for housing, and trying to, I think, balance all these piles of money to see if we can get, potentially additional money for housing. We just can't commit that now because we haven't heard from all the other people that are asking for ARPA funds. And there are considerable numbers of people and some who think it would be a great idea. Although I think personally, one of the things we said as a council that was so important is that we really wanted this to show real stewardship and make a difference. And I think affordable housing makes an enormous difference long term. We wanted something that could last versus, I don't know, maybe $20,000 for planning, which might be really, really important, but it's potentially less of a concrete legacy, I think. So we have a proposal. Oh, okay.
100,000 more.
Yeah.
Yeah, Vince Bolduc, member of the Affordable Housing Committee. Just very briefly, I want to make sure it's perfectly clear that we did not see anything wrong with the summit proposal. There was nothing that we could degrade about it or complain about it. It was very good. It was just a matter of how much money do we have? We heard $1 million from the council, and we said, well, why didn't they make it 1.3 or 1.5? There's more money out there. We know there is, and so we're kind of talking about an arbitrary number here. And so we kind of strategically said, let's ask for 1.1 and then push it a little bit and see if they can give us a little bit more. But they're all very good proposals. And so I just wanted to say that. And I really hope you'll make some motions and pass them on this tonight. We don't want to postpone any of these projects. They're good projects. Thanks.
Okay, Sandy, this is number 3.
I wish Cindy Reed were here to talk about Cathedral Square, because while it may not have permits, those buildings are all built. So we're not talking about construction. But she used to be on the Affordable Housing Committee. And one of the things she said to us that stuck with me is there is virtually no assisted care living facilities that are affordable. And there may be pressure. Joe Larkin may have a lot of people that want to pay a lot of money, more money than Cathedral Square can afford. All of the 34 units of residential care that are there now are market rate, and they're going to make them 100% affordable. I wish that were in here. Then the ones that are rental for people that work in that field, they're going to be 28 market rate and 8 inclusionary. So I just want to say I don't know if there's pressure on that. I can't imagine there isn't. I don't think Mr. Larkin's going to wait forever. But I just wanted you to know that would take 34 market rate assisted living to 34 affordable assisted living, permanently affordable.
Well, there's the dilemma. The committee dealt with those concerns and came to a decision, and the council has a proposal that's slightly different. I guess I would like to say that, there's still a couple million left in the ARPA, right? And this is a real need. So it's potentially, I think there's a good chance of funding all of them. I think tonight what we're trying to say is we've dedicated $1 million. We have 100,000 in the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. So at this point in time, we could go forward with Summit, Habitat, and Ho-Hum with those 2 funding sources and come back to the other housing proposals when we dig a little deeper into all of, I haven't added up all the requests for the ARPA money. I don't know if anyone on the council has. They're more than we have, and some, you know, it'll be another hard decision. But that's kind of, I think, where we're coming down. So we have this proposal. Is anyone ready to second that?
Oh, I will. We're $100,000 over apparently. So, I mean, I could
From the
have.
trust fund.
But I'm suggesting we add 100,000 from the trust fund. I know they haven't gone through their process, but we could supplement that with, or we could figure it out later. We could find that 100,000 in ARPA money and put the 100 back in the housing
We could,
trust. But
yeah.
it's there, and
Okay.
these are, two of them are shovel ready.
Okay. Well, then I will.
So that's what I'm suggesting.
All
Just
right. I
as
feel the will
a
of the council.
process.
So.
Do we have
I agree with that. I just want to stress that the gazebo property rehab is a really, really important
I
project.
agree.
And I'm really interested in it. And I want to see it move forward, especially because it contains housing for the employees that are going to work in the other building.
Yes.
I think it's a great idea for that property. And I don't want to abandon that
No.
at all.
Oh, I don't either. And
I don't
it's
either.
been, you know, it
Yeah.
was in receivership for a while. I mean, the
Right.
management there was
Yeah.
challenging at best for a while. Yeah.
So I support your idea.
Yep.
And your motion.
Okay.
I look forward to talking about that soon, but I would like to get the grants out now because
Okay.
the crisis is here now.
I would too.
I will second the motion I understood Councilor Emery to have made if Sue Alnick is okay with it.
I would like.
I'm
some
trying to talk into the microphone.
Okay, so
So you're
would
saying
like some
300
clarification.
Summit, 300 Ho-Hum, 500 Dorset Commons for $1 million from ARPA and $100,000 from the Housing Trust Fund.
yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Good compromise.
And then potentially, you know,
More later.
More later.
will be more
Shuffling
ARPA
or
money
more.
to
Yeah.
supplement some of it. Okay, so do we need, you want us to vote on this, or is this just, that's the direction? We can vote. I'm happy.
If you are ready and have a motion and can vote on directing staff to enter into
Okay.
grant agreements
Okay,
in this way.
So we
I
have
think
that
would be
motion.
helpful.
Chris, did you want to make a comment?
Just kind of closing comments, just kind of wrap up the proposals from us. In the comprehensive plan, it talks about being affordable with housing for people of all income, lifestyles, and stages of life. The four proposals that we've moved forward for the 1.4 million represents that entire spectrum, where this would be housing for that entire spectrum. And you know, in regards to home ownership, we're hoping by the addition of transitional housing for somebody who was formerly homeless, and they can move up through that spectrum and someday move into home ownership. And that's really the power of the gap financing to these highly reputable developers. You know, that 177 households or over 300 people is a lasting commitment that will help not just the people that are today, but the people that would be there tomorrow. And it was the will of the affordable housing for the 1.4. And you know, there's certainly a compelling urgency of when you hear the reports that come out of the point in time report for homelessness, you know, just the steady stream of housing articles about, you know, how difficult that is to get that out there. The urgency is there, and this would make a real impact for those people that would be served today and tomorrow. So thank you for the opportunity to present this. This is a fantastic experience, and it really demonstrates the power of leveraging some of the reputable builders in our area. So thank you.
Well, I thank you for putting together that sort of continuum, and it is very compelling. And we'll make our first step tonight, doing most of it, and come back to consider the final pieces. So we have a motion. You ready for the vote? Okay, all in favor of the 1.1 million from the two sources for the three projects, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
So that's passed 4-0. I want to really thank both the committees for your hard work your really thoughtful review of these. I think, Emily, this is just the beginning of some of those hard committee discussions when the decisions, they're all hard, they're all good, and you have to come down somewhere. So I appreciate all your work. So thank you very much. Okay, we'll move on. What time is it? 8:26. Well, we're not too far behind. Item 10, it's reviewing the ARPA survey report.
All right, well, I'll share screen here. 1 second. All right, so just a little bit of background here. The council approved the survey on June 6th. It went live June 16th. It was open for a little over 2 months, and we received 351 responses, which, as I understand, is a high for surveys that the city has done in the past. If we're looking at it from a statistical number, for a population our size, 20,000 individuals, if we're looking for a confidence level of 95%, a margin of error of 5%, the ID sample size would be 377 responses. So we're pretty close to that sort of best practices target number for a survey for a community our size. We asked a number of demographic questions just so we could have a better understanding of who we heard from and whether or not that would be representative of the community that we serve. We asked a question on affiliation, had 62% that responded that they are property owners. This is pretty close to the 60-40 ratio that we know that we have in the city of South Burlington between property owners and renters. So that number is pretty close. I'll talk about it a little bit more on the age side, but we skew a little bit older than census data that we have. But this is just a broad overview of who we heard from.
I thought it was kind of interesting that 30% of the respondents were 31 to 45. So the people who have children are definitely engaged.
Yeah, I thought that was
age, and that's I think that's great.
Yeah, that was better than I expected.
Yeah.
That's a good number. Here's a respondent location. This is a pretty even split based on our what's the data source? The 2019 estimates of the American Community Survey run by the census. The SEQ was exactly 33%. So this is more or less in line with our community. This slide, just to begin to talk before we sort of dive into the results, how our sample differs from the rest of the population. I would say this question more than any other is sort of the outlier. Is a much more highly educated respondent group that we heard from than we have in the census data. Already talked about education levels. Also, I talked before also about the general age. We definitely skew a little bit older, which is relatively consistent with what we see in terms of civil engagement. Also, ethnicity, those folks who preferred not to say definitely creates a little bit of uncertainty in these results, but we do know that those who did respond, that we did not hear from our Black African American community or Asian community, or those of one or more ethnicity. So on to the results. So the first question we asked is, how has COVID-19 impacted your daily lives? And the several results were financially, socially, loss of social connection, personal health, access to services, or other. And this socially lost of social connection obviously is the big, that's the big bar here. That's what we receive the most responses. Diving into the other, a few selected responses were folks talking about housing vulnerability, challenges scheduling mental health services or appointment with doctor, engagement with professional community. I also wanted to highlight these two on the bottom, able to more safely bike with less roadway traffic. Thought that was an interesting positive response, and also spent more time recreating outdoors. We asked the question, an open-ended question, in a few words described how the pandemic most affected you and your family. And consistent with question one, the responses were talking about social isolation and not having time to spend with friends and family. Childcare came up in this question, social contact, as well as mental health. Another open-ended question we asked, and a word cloud here, it forced a number of changes in the way we live, work, and play. What, if any, of these changes would you like to see continue into the future? And I don't think it's any surprise that a lot of folks talked about the flexibility that COVID allowed with remote work options, with remote meeting options, Zoom options. Just that general flexibility was something we saw come up a lot. A lot of people also wrote none, which I thought was interesting. There's nothing that they appreciated about in the changes of COVID. But
nothing. And was the mask? I'm surprised that has such large print. Is that what people were bothered by? Or
no,
they want to continue to wear masks?
Yep. Yeah, that was one of the responses we saw a lot of.
Health
Is
thing?
that? Yep. Is that it's? I mean, people recognizing that we're still in a pandemic and appreciate that they want to see masks continue into the future, at least through until we're out of it, is the presumption.
Okay.
Some people are still wearing them. I don't know who those people are.
Sandy touched on this one earlier. We asked the question, kind of identifying the 6 key purposes that are identified in the ARPA guidelines. And how would you individually prioritize the importance of those in South Burlington? And we asked respondents to rank from 1 to 5. I thought, a couple of highlights. Essential worker pay was very low. Water, sewer, and internet infrastructure was both very high in terms of individuals rating it as the most important, but also very high in those who rated it the least important. If we look at an average of all of these responses, as Sandy alluded to earlier, communities disproportionately impacted, they had 3.16 average. Public health impacts 3.12. Economic impacts 3.07. Infrastructure 3.03. Premium pay 2.7. So not a huge spread among responses. So this is the list that we generated, and absolutely right that affordable housing was not something we included on our list. That was in part because council had already allocated $1 million towards it. So this was a question of what other projects would you be interested in the city investing in. So those who listed these as very important, it's the total number of responses here. Childcare got by far the most, and I think you'll see that in other slides. This is really an outlier in terms of responses we got. Childcare had a huge impact on individuals through COVID, and they're looking for some type of solutions.
Was the water, sewer, and stormwater as much related to climate change and using ARPA funds to make a difference? Or, I mean, I just kind of don't understand that high response unless it was we could use this money to make a difference around climate change.
Yeah. No, I mean, in terms of the question that was asked, we identified it as very broadly, that this money could fund water, sewer, or stormwater infrastructure projects in the city.
Yeah, it's interesting to me. Or what? Yeah, it was close to it.
Yeah, that's the next,
That was
the
a
other
separate
part.
one. I get that. I mean, from COVID, the stormwater, I don't see the connection. No offense, Tom.
On the, I also just highlighted those who listed these projects as not at all important. It's relatively consistent. It's in the horizontal axis is the same as the very important. I have not shared these with Alana yet, but no offense to public art here.
And city center. Who cares?
In just an average score, this is pretty consistent with what we saw in the first question in terms of the ranking. This is just a weighted average across each category. You can almost see sort of 4 tiers here: childcare, the outlier again, a cluster, and those next 3 very even, and then recreational facility, city center, public art. So I think this is sort of the meat of what council was asking, is sort of what great ideas are out there that we haven't thought of, or what other priorities that aren't in this first, this list that we have, that you would like to see this funding support. What really surprised me in this result was just how many people responded talking about the need for improvements in our recreation and community spaces. So both in improvements to our parks infrastructure, as well as developing and I'll talk about in the next slide, a community pool or a recreation center.
Tom at the pool as part of his campaign.
Yeah, and one thing, I did provide council with sort of the raw data set of all these responses. It's, well over 300 responses. It takes time kind of weeding through, but it's very interesting to see what individuals talk about. And here, just to sort of, create the ease of looking at it, I didn't include any responses that didn't have 5 or more that dedicated to them. One thing that did pop up a lot was child care, which I didn't necessarily include in this list just because of it is talked about so much on it is a specifically identified project in the 12 that we outline. We also got a number of responses on school infrastructure needs. And then a large number of responses that just sort of said very broadly, use the investment wisely. Don't spend this on ongoing operational costs. Use this to pay down debts, or just invest this money well. And then specific project responses. Parks, just breaking out that prior list. Parks improvements, community pool, recreation center. Those were the big responses. And then again, you can sift through the 300 plus responses at your leisure, but I thought there were some interesting kind of unique or one-off responses that we got. Mountain bike trail, more benches around high-use stretches of city rec paths, a solar pavilion workspace amenity in the city park, and someone actually provided a link to the service in the survey. And then this is another way we asked, a very similar to question 5, and just had folks kind of go through the exercise of ranking from 1 to 13. What's the highest priority project to 13? What's the lowest priority project? And here are the results. Again, the horizontal axis on the bottom is the exact same as the order of ranking that was in question 5. But you can see the results different a little bit in terms of what they rank as the highest priority. Having gone through the exercise of providing the individual responses, I just wonder how much more of those sort of keyed them into things like recreational facility, for example, scoring a little bit higher in this. then showing the least or lowest priority. And then the weighted average among these. So just to highlight a couple of the summary trends, so many respondents talked about the sort of a dire need for increased access to childcare services is something that I know we've all heard of a lot in our own work in the last couple of years. Isolation, increased use of green and recreational spaces. There was a lot of ideas. I think in the spreadsheet I've been building out just based on leadership team and committee requests that we've had. We have 37 different project ideas or potential project ideas. If you wanted to include any of these ideas, that would increase that list exponentially. I thought it was also interesting that while it did not rank highly overall in terms of prioritization, overwhelming individual responses for desire for improvement and development of community recreational spaces and improvement of our parks. And then, as I talked before, overall concerns about aging school district infrastructure. So that's the broad outline of what we've heard from folks. I think back in your earlier discussions about what you'd like to see occur with this ARPA, with these ARPA dollars, was transformational one-time projects. What's the biggest bang for our buck? What's the thing we're going to look back on in 10 to 20 years and say, we seized this opportunity and this is what we did with these dollars. And I think another kind of key goal was, we want to engage the community as well as we can. And what brilliant ideas are out there that we haven't thought of? So the few questions that I have with this, you've now received these responses. Is there any additional outreach? Are there any changes in those value statements? Are there so many projects that you sort of see in front of you that you may feel a little bit differently about? Okay, this $50,000 project, that makes some sense. This $200,000, that makes a lot of sense. Or is it still this sort of, okay, we have $3 million remaining. We want this to go to one project. We want this to go to two projects. We want this to go to something, again, that's large and transformational. Are there any of those projects that you see in this data? And is there any investment categories, for example, childcare or improving our rec spaces, that you'd like sort of additional staff feedback? If we were going to allocate $1 million towards improving our recreational spaces, staff come up with a plan of what that would look like. Or if it's childcare services, what can we leverage to have some sort of community spending to improve access to childcare? And then the last question I just ask is timeline. Do you want this to occur as part of the FY24 budget process? Very soon will be later discussion about the budget schedule, but very soon we'll be talking about overall the city's funding CIP needs and other budget goals that we have for FY24. As council is aware, we're starting FY23 in a little bit of a hole because of increased project costs and because of the CPI being so high and the impacts that's had to our wages. Would you like to hear about sort of what some of those potentially unfunded CIP projects or goals may be, and whether this could supplement that? Is that an important data point for you to hear going into budget season? So it's a lot of information. I know in front of you, and it's a very hard choice to make. But and as far as next steps, let us know what we can kind of bring our professional feedback back to you to help you make the best informed decision you can.
Can I make one other comment?
You may. Please.
So Andrew did a great job on the survey. I do just want to also note for the council that you very intentionally did not ask the committees to provide individual recommendations. You were really focused on the survey. However, many of the committees did provide you recommendations, so those are also attached to your agenda tonight as well.
Well, I, for one, would, I, I, I recognize the challenge with childcare. It's enormous. I'm puzzled with or stymied with what we as a community can do. I mean, what the kinds of programs that the state funds tends to be helping people pay for it. You know, some kind of sliding scale or, and you know, it would work for a year and then the ARPA money goes away if that's what we chose. So I guess I would like to see some more concrete ideas about, so what does that mean? What can a community do? How do you do that in a lasting way? So it's not a one-time expenditure, kind of an operating budget sort of, we'll give vouchers to, anyone who can't afford childcare. Because once the voucher's spent, it's gone, and then you got to replace it, and we won't have this money. So I would look for some creative ideas about that. And I don't have them in my head, and I'd like to hear some. So maybe going out again and asking some of these people would be helpful. Megan?
Yeah, with regard to childcare, I was surprised to see that the indoor recreation facility wasn't seen as a natural kind of partner with that. Because I think that
maybe that's how you do it. Yeah.
Right, where you provide a space, and that could be used in one way or another. That to me was a disconnect in the results. I also heard Jesse say that we could be somehow leveraging community development funds and helping agencies, be a conduit to those funds as another way for us. But I don't know that we need to use ARPA funds for that.
Right.
So that's with regard to childcare. I was struck by the need for better sidewalks. I mean, it's not a major, a major legacy, but it is something, I saw that. So those outdoor amenities for people to walk and to be able to walk without falling, right? Or get around, that was, that popped out at me.
I would like to go back to childcare, for instance, and I don't know a lot. I mean, my children were in childcare at one point during time, but there seemed to be enough childcare back in the 90s and the early 2000s, right? And I know that before the pandemic hit, there was a reduction in childcare capacity, and then it hit, and it was a further reduction, right? And I hear through the grapevine that another childcare facility just closed recently, right? That's affected a lot of people. So the question is, how do you get more childcare capacity? People have to open them, right, or reopen them. And the question is what dial does the city have to help with that? Could it be help with permits, or help with expenditures for whatever it takes to secure space, or I don't know what those things are and whether the state has funds to help with that or not. But there has to be a person, first of all, that wants to start a child care, or a group of people that are interested in doing it cooperatively, right? That puts somebody in charge, that sets a plan in motion and has a space, and then needs to acquire, the equipment as well. So, but I have no experience with that, and I don't know who does that could advise us about how the city could help with that.
So if that is an area that you all want us to look into, I think that there are a number of advocacy organizations that focus on childcare in Vermont, and I think we could do some research about if we had X number of dollars to leverage, what would that look like? My mind immediately goes to some kind of helping secure real estate or a lease for a new child care center to buy down that startup cost so the cost they charge is lower over time. We could do something similar to affordable housing where we issue an RFP to the community and say, give us your best ideas for X amount of money and see what we get back in the childcare realm. So if that is something that we're hearing some interest in, we certainly can go back and do some research on different options for you.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, Jesse. I'd love to hear from Sarah Kenny at Let's Grow Kids and other entities that probably have some good ideas on how to spend funds in order to increase availability of childcare.
Would it be helpful to give them a dollar figure, like we did with affordable housing? I don't even know how much we have left. Is it 3 million?
Potentially.
Yes, we have,
Well, no, I mean-
3.89 million left.
Pardon me?
3.89 million left.
1.1 that we
3.089 million left.
That's
yeah.
after the 1.1 that we just approved?
Yes.
A million.
Yep, because $1 million was already allocated.
019. Okay.
It's in the memo right before it in the packet today.
Oh.
So that number remains because the 100,000 that's coming from the trust fund
Right.
is not being.
Okay.
Sure.
Yes.
I'd love to involve the school in that discussion as well. It just seems like there's a natural fit for it. And if the city can work with the school to somehow open up available or future school resources for more pre-K and pre-K opportunities, that seems to be a good place to plug in with them.
Yeah.
Well, they have money too.
The concern I have is I think that there are, and I see a educator here in the audience who might have something to say, but I think that they have stiffer requirements at the state level as a public school than perhaps a private care provider would have. And
There's different formulas when it's inside of the school building. But with all this affordable care, especially the
Carol, why don't you come up to the mic so everyone at home can hear you? Please.
I'm thinking about the logic of most of the people that need affordable homes are the younger families, and they're the ones having children. So what about the concept of in these units of these 4 projects having a child care center as part of the development? When you have 71 families, that's a lot of child care. So I'm just thinking, while you're just beginning these projects and you're helping to fund them, it would be very powerful to be working with some leaders in early child care and talk about what would happen or what's the pros and cons of making some of the affordable housing unit an actual care facility. Just a thought.
Well, I would like to put a dollar figure out there and get some responses. And I'd be willing to put $1 million toward this.
I'm with you. I'm there.
So that's where I am.
Okay.
And then see what kind of proposals, and maybe the RFP could encourage those proposals to work with some of the affordable housing projects that we're supporting. For another $200,000, maybe you can build a center. Okay. I'm such a spendthrift, huh? I got the $1 million for housing, now it's $1 million for, yeah.
The big check writing pen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we wanted to make a difference.
Yes.
So you can't do it with a $20,000
No.
planning grant for childcare. I don't think.
Yeah.
So I'm hearing 1 million for childcare. We still have 2 million.
I know, going fast. Yes, John.
Sorry, John. I was supposed to tell you earlier that he wanted to adjust the council. Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry, John. I do have it written down on my paper. Ask Helen to call.
Thank you. I'm John Kalaki, and I'm with the Public Art Committee. And I think you heard that there were 30 proposals from your committees.
Yeah, between the leadership team and committees.
Right. So I urge the council to look at those proposals because I'm just with the Public Art Committee. We spent a lot of time and we developed a proposal for you to consider to use in a transformational way these ARPA dollars. And if there's 30 of them and you're already divvying up the $3 million without any input from your committees or your leadership team, I think you're getting a little ahead. And as I have a little pony and she pulls me in a cart. The cart right now is before the pony. And I think vet these proposals from your committee structure and then bring any priority you want for the dollars. Childcare is a very essential thing as well. But it's kind of hard to sit here and hear you taking the $3 million as if it's your dollars and not what your committee and your leadership team is also recommending. So I just urge you to really, it's in the document, and I'm sure each committee will come and be glad to talk about it and the strengths of those proposals. And it may be $10 million. I don't know. Andrew, what is it? What is it, the dollar amount of all these?
Yeah, 10 million is probably pretty close to where it is.
So those are going to be hard decisions, and you're going to have to decide which are transformational. But I urge you to just slow down and vet those first before you start sending out RFPs to providers in our community with dollar amounts for a particular piece, because answers might be in your committee proposals. And I don't know if everyone's read them or not, but if there's 30 of them in your docket. Anyway, so I thought I was going to be speaking upon this one, but I think this is not the time to do that. I'll come back. If you take testimony on the 30 proposals, I would be glad to do that. Thank you.
Well, I'm willing to hear you tonight if you, I don't know about the council. I mean, we're sort of at our time for this.
Can you come up to the mic? And I really just hold on. The people online can't hear you if you're not.
I'm pretty loud.
Yeah, we need the microphone.
Okay. I actually think that. Oh, I'm Cindy Freeman. I just recently became part of the Recs and Parks Committee. And I actually think that's really a smart thing before the money's thrown around tonight at $3 million. To have the committee members come and speak about what they think, how the funds might be able to be used. And then you guys can kind of make a decision then. I think it would be good to wait for all of the committees, for you to read what the committee said. I wasn't part of that committee decision, I wasn't there, but I think it would be good to actually go ahead and read those first and then maybe have a time that all the committee members come here, at least a few of them, and make their case for how to spend the ARPA funds.
Yes, go ahead.
So I just want to comment that the council did spend a lot of time in developing the survey, thinking about the committees and whether to go to the committees and ask for feedback. And because they had this shared goal of seeing a big transformation with these projects and not kind of doling out small bits to each committee, they purposely did not go to the committees to ask for feedback in the hopes that committee members and the rest of our neighbors would complete the survey and we'd see a whole picture of the city. So obviously it's their decision how to best move forward, but I don't want the community to think that they asked for something that now they're not listening to, because that was very intentional on their part at the beginning of the process.
And, I think it's good counsel. I just looked at the public survey though, and childcare was way up there.
Yeah.
So, and we don't have a childcare committee or any committee that really deals with childcare.
Well, the economic Development Committee put it at the top of their list.
Maybe it would be good to just have the question go out about the childcare without the amount of money. You know, just have that question go out there and not put the $1 million toward it. Just.
Pardon me? Oh, I'm sorry, Sandy? You're kind of hidden behind the.
With all due respect to my neighbor and my representative, I would encourage you to put out an RFP. I think the experience with the affordable housing is if you put out a set amount of money, you really get creativity and things that I think will really benefit the community. I also volunteer at a child care center every week, and this is just an idea. Another thing that's a big issue is staffing.
Yeah.
I was volunteering this afternoon. Things were a bit crazy because one of the teachers wasn't there that day. So even you might have it would be temporary, but maybe a 4-year scholarship program for South Burlington students to pursue it in college with the promise of working in the field for, something like. It's just, I think you could get all kinds of ideas.
Mm-hmm.
I also want to say, I read all this stuff, and I heard Jesse at our meeting say, we don't really have the staffing to put in place and operate a new program. We were talking about weatherization. So we specifically talked about partnering or adding on or supplementing. But I read through all that stuff, and, it's a lot of work to manage who knows how many $50,000, $75,000, $100,000 grants or programs or whatever. So to a certain degree, if it's going to be transformative, I think that tends to correlate with a bigger price tag. So I would encourage you to put out an RFP for $1 million for childcare. It's amazing to me that you got that from the survey, and it really, to me, says something.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Could I just?
Yes, so you certainly may.
The reason why I support the RFP idea is, but I want to stipulate that doesn't mean that we're going to spend $1 million. It means we just want to hear different proposals about how we would spend it. And picking $1 million is as arbitrary as picking $738,000. It's just trying to come up with ideas on how to answer a community's need for childcare and how we can access these one-time monies for this transformational change. But it doesn't negate any of the work that the committee's done or any of the projects or obligate us to spend that, whatever that amount is, on that issue, because perhaps nothing comes back because we can't do anything for less than 10. We don't know, but we need to find out.
Mm-hmm. Another thing that popped out at me, but we have our GMT person here too, is covered areas at the bus stops. That would be huge. I mean, it goes along with unbroken sidewalks. But, and I really want us to think about where that transformation needs to take place. And I think that we have to go out into neighborhoods where, people do have broken sidewalks and people don't have access or, affordable care. And they're the ones taking the bus too. I think we have to think, who did this hit the most? We saw economic hardship, right? I mean, that it was in certain neighborhoods, right? I mean, what can we do in those neighborhoods? So I think of it that way too.
Well, I think those are good ideas. What is your pleasure? I mean, I threw out $1 million because I I think you can get some good ideas back. I appreciate John's comments that, you know, there's a lot of other committees who, and I've read through all this stuff too. So perhaps we need to table this and come back to it and have set up a meeting. Maybe we need a special meeting to just focus on the committee's presentations on the ARPA funds. Maybe at the same time, we could have some childcare leaders testify, or not testify, but share ideas that will help us, you know, winnow down, what's the right dollar figure? I don't know. I just keep going back to, we really do want this to be kind of once in a lifetime transformational. And I think some of the, just my opinion, some of the suggestions for committees were good, but they also are things that we probably should have in our budget. You know, some of the planning kinds of dollars I always support. It's great to have a plan for all the parks. We need to have that. We should fund that, just not because of COVID, but because we have parks and it's a big part of our budget and it's something that we should really be thinking about carefully.
Yeah, and that's
So does that sound like do you want a special meeting or do you want to do this next meeting?
What does the next meeting
Next
look like?
meeting
Next
is
meeting is
busy.
mayhem.
Yeah.
Next
You know,
meeting.
we can add another agenda item at the next meeting and continue the discussion, right? Because, and maybe we'll have some more information or some more input.
Yeah.
But, you know, the essence of this is that the federal government allocated a bunch of money because the pandemic damaged our society. It damaged it badly. It killed over 1 million people. It's still killing people. It's still sickening a lot of people with long COVID. It's damaged the country's GDP. It's damaged our productivity. It's damaged our employee workforce on a national and an international scale. And so the money should be used, if we can, to try and find those things that were fragile to begin with that have been damaged that we can repair, and repair them on a long-term scale so that we make ourselves more resilient and more robust for the future times something like this happens, right? Whatever that might be. And, you know, we already had some problems going into it, and we discovered that, bam, one of them is that childcare. And so childcare problems have removed large numbers of women from the workforce immediately, right, during the pandemic and after the pandemic, right? And also probably people trying to get exercise because they couldn't socialize has exposed some issues with our, recreation infrastructure. And so we can look at that too. But there are all these great items that came up in the survey, and, I want to be able to evaluate them equally as well as the suggestions from the committees. But you're right, Helen, some of the things are either in the CIP or they should be in the budget as well.
Mm-hmm.
So.
All right. Oh, Tom, yes.
Just to segue us, moving us along, what I think the committees didn't have prior to this discussion was the survey results. And so I love special meetings, Helen. And if you want to have a special meeting and have the committees come in so that they can integrate what they see in this to maybe for the Public Arts Committee can recognize that there was a large demand for more recreation outdoor spaces. So maybe it's reading your Public Arts Committee recommendation, you're going to craft that to focus it on expanding the band shell at the Veterans Memorial. So I would love another special meeting to really dive into what the committees are recommending before we start throwing numbers and RFPs out there.
If I can make one.
Yes,
yeah,
please.
Quick comment on that. So because council's sort of initial guidance was not getting committee input, I don't think the committees all sort of had a fair shake at going through it. So I would just recommend council giving enough time for them to each committee to kind of come up with their own proposal if they hadn't already and refine
Sure.
it. So.
I think by and large most did, but maybe not all.
Not all.
Yeah.
We did get a bunch, but yes, we should get from all. Yeah. So let's.
Could I say one?
Yes, yeah.
So part of why we gave you the full data is that this data isn't just, you don't have to use this just for the ARPA conversation. You can use it for, as we develop the comprehensive plan, as we develop the FY24 budget. So so this, all this, these ideas and this community conversation doesn't go away with just these decisions.
Right. Absolutely. Okay. So, do people want a special meeting? Yeah, just to do this next?
enough meetings lately. I like more meetings rather than longer meetings. That's just where I am. I concur.
So
Next Monday?
So if we're going to give committees time to
yeah.
respond, I
Okay.
think we need to give them I would say 2 months.
Yeah.
So they can receive the direction and then put something out. So I think
November?
most of them haven't so I think we're looking at a special meeting in November.
Okay.
We have some time, December 31st, 2024. To have Not that I want to wait that long, but we got a little bit of time.
Yep, we do.
I will send around a doodle poll to find a time and then give direction to the committees.
Okay, good. We are, before we move on to item 11, we're just going to take a very quick break. Thank you.
Is there any money coming from the state for weatherization or no? There is. Yeah.
There's quite a few different pots of money, yeah. Yeah, we'll get the grill out. Vroom, vroom. Okay. So I would like to call back to order the South Burlington City Council meeting of Tuesday, September 6th. We will pick up on item 11, which is an update on the construction of the Wheeler Dog Park and options for moving forward, and provide direction to staff. And before we begin, I just want to set some ground rules or some expectations that I have. And I think there's a lot of water over the dam or under the bridge on this one. And lots of comments from the other paper or letters to the editor. And I think what we need to focus on is not to try to figure out who is at fault, who made the mistakes, why they were made. Obviously, mistakes were made. And so what we need to do now is find a way forward. And what is a proposal that we can live with short term, medium term, long term? Where can we go in a way that works for the city, the staff, the committees, and certainly, in this case, the canine population? So I just want to put that out there. Let's refrain from he said, she said, or this person did this or didn't do this. That's not where we need to go tonight. So Tom, you have put together a report or an update, and you want to, or Jesse, do you want to start? I don't know how you've figured this out in terms of, I mean, we've all read it, but
Yeah, I think that was a great setup. I think Tom's presented you with some options for how to best move forward based on the topography and operations reality on the ground. So I will let him run with it.
Okay.
Yes. Well, thank you, Helen. Thank you, Jesse. For those that don't know me, Tom DePietro. I'm your Public Works Director. And my involvement with the dog park is pretty recent. And so I appreciate your commentary, Helen. I think after hearing the comments, reading the comments, meeting with Betty, I think it's an important asset to the community. So we're really looking forward to kind of moving this forward and getting it open for everybody here with some good direction tonight. That said, the installation of the fence, we encountered some issues when we went to install it. And so there's kind of two maps in your packet. The first is a black and white map, the approved plan. The second has a little more color with some pink, green, and blue blobs on it. That's a map I put together, doing a little GIS mapping. So some of the issues we encountered, I tried to call out on that color map, but they focused around basically getting the fence installed and issues related to the presence of ledge, topography that wasn't conducive to installing fence, kind of bedrock outcroppings, steep hills, and then concerns about areas that couldn't be very easily traversed or mowed and maintained due to the ledge again, drainage features, uneven or dangerous ground. So as kind of a result of all that, and as people have rightly pointed out, sort of what is fenced in at the moment is not the 2.2 acres. It's about half that size. So hearing those commentary, or hear that commentary, we have, well, I should also say there was also commentary around making it accessible for all users, which we agree with, and we can do, and modifying the park entrance to make it a little smaller and discourage dogs from kind of playing in the area. So we've put together kind of a list of recommendations for moving forward, and I can go through those in a little bit of detail, or I can kind of pause there to talk about the current condition of the park, however council wishes to proceed.
Why don't you go through with your recommendations?
Okay.
Then we can ask questions and understand them, and
very good.
Because
yeah.
all of them have a dollar figure assigned to each as well, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So we met with the fencing company, and a lot of the figures that you'll see in here, there aren't the two I've talked about already, figures 3 through 6, as I tried to label them for clarity. Those are sort of maps that the fencing company has given to us based on what they think they can do in different areas. So I'll start with the park entrance. What we'd like to do there is replace the wood chips that were specified with a crushed stone, make that a nice compact area so there's no questions about kind of safety or traction, things like that. We would also like to rearrange the fence as requested by others to make it a little smaller to discourage kind of dogs playing in that entrance area. We can do that and make sure everything is ADA compliant. So that was recommendation number 1, kind of N2, that ensured that the gate mechanism is ADA compliant as well. N3 actually, I rolled through the first 3 for you, so modifying the park entrance. And so we can get the SurePack material or crushed limestone out of the Public Works budget. That's a small cost. We'll do that with our staff. Modifying the fence, we'd get the fence company back in to do that. That was about $1,300. Figure 4 shows the dog park fence in sort of the southwest corner in where the large dog area is, and there's sort of an outline there that shows how that area could be expanded by 0.3 acres. That was estimated to be about $6,600.
Okay, so the south, I always get confused about where this is. What's south and what's north. So on this map, oh, there's north. So the south.
So right where the cursor is, thank you, I think, Jesse, right? Yeah, there's a nice flat area up there that in the initial fence installation, it was hard to get there because of the rock outcropping near with the ledge sticking out. So that area was kind of removed from the locations that were previously fenced in. But we can go back and fence in some additional area in that location for about $6,600.
And that's figure 4. If you
That's right, yeah.
move over, there it is. And the next page 2 shows a close-up. There, yep.
Yeah, exactly.
It's easier on the big map.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's hard because there's the writing and then there's the pictures.
That's what I was showing on.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's probably better. Yeah.
So that's and so just is that upper corner, or does it go all the way along the bike path down to, I guess that's the northwest corner?
Yeah, so in the northwest corner, for where the greener area is, that signifies the small dog area as it's currently constructed. That is figure 5. The fence company gave us an estimate and kind of an outline for how that area could be expanded. And that resulted in an additional 0.1 acres, let's call it, just under a tenth of an acre of additional space for about $4,400. One of the concerns we had in that area is it's very wet.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also the ledge, so we couldn't bring the fence kind of north to south as was shown in the original plan. So that's why that area got avoided. If council did want us to move forward and modify the fence to include that roughly tenth of an acre, we'd also want to talk about doing a little bit of drainage work there, perhaps, to dry that area up a bit. That was not included in the original plan. So that's part of the recommendation. And then lastly is the large area, if you go back to that original map to the east. So that's where the majority of the park area was lost in the fence installation. That area is a steeper slope. There's some ledge concerns. There's 2 drainage features that kind of run south to north. So due to all that, the fence was installed. It was pulled in to the east. I'm concerned about including that area in the park for our human users, just because it's a very uneven area, and I don't know we'd be able to mow it. We'd be concerned about some slip and falls and injury kind of going up and down that slope, more so again for the human users than the dog users. So wanted to make sure that council was aware of those issues. If council did want to move forward with fencing in that area as well, we might also consider some additional site work to kind of even that out over time.
Even out the
ground surface.
The ground surface.
At least to get rid of the divots and kind of the uneven ground surface. There's nothing we can do about the slope. It kind of falls off there towards the west.
And that's more for humans than dogs, because I don't think the dogs care.
The dogs probably wouldn't have as much of a concern.
They love to have the up and down, I would assume.
And those 2 drainage features that kind of flow south to north are a little bit concerning as far as human users as well. And just our ability to maintain that area, I guess, is also a large concern. So I think there'd have to be an understanding that it would not be mowed like a lawn. Because when we went in and originally brush hogged that area, we did damage some equipment just to get in there to kind of knock it down. So we just want to make sure, I guess, that we have a proper expectation set for maintenance as well if we were to expand in these various areas, whether it's due to the wetness or the ground surface, our ability to mow it and maintain it. I just want to make sure those are set properly too. So I think that's an important part of the conversation.
So if you did do the drainage, you think you could then mow it?
No.
Or not? No. Well, I know dogs like high grass, but ticks like high grass too. So I think that's a reality in Vermont, and I have Lyme, so I'm real careful where my dogs run because I don't want to get it again, or get a reoccurrence. So, you know, I think some consideration about keeping the grass at a, I don't know, non-tick height or something. I don't know what that is.
And so
might
just
be concerning to some pet owners, you know.
Yeah.
Maybe not. Maybe y'all pick them off when they come home and it's not a problem.
The question that I'd ask Tom if I could.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is talking with members of the dog common area for dogs committee. There's a real interest to have a Friends of the Dog Park take over that aspect of maintenance. So go in with weed whackers, for instance, to cut the long grasses where the mowers could not get to. How would you respond to that idea?
I think it's our preference to have sort of clear expectations for maintenance set and have our staff do it so we don't have to worry about liability and injury and things of that nature. I mean, we've had some other volunteer efforts in the past, and I'll use the Rain Garden Adoption Program, which is a great program. I wish more folks were involved, but it kind of falls off and it can become as much effort to kind of coordinate that than actually just do it on your own. So it would be our preference to just kind of have the conversation, set the expectation, and have our folks do it. But if that was council, even if that was the direction we had to head, we could give that a try.
So,
And I think if that's the direction we're going, then we're not managing that. That would be solely volunteer management, and that the commentary about the park and the maintenance efforts would also be passed on to the volunteers. I think that is a thing that you could do, but I also think that when we invest in municipal infrastructure, we should be pairing that with the cost it takes to maintain that infrastructure. I think that should be an expectation of the taxpayers, that if we're going to use their dollars to do something, we are also going to use their dollars to maintain it.
So if I could, I'm just trying to hear from Tom, your baseline. So for this to expand into that southeastern area, the only way you see as really viable with regard to city liability and just what Jesse explained here is that it would be a tall grassy area, hopefully with less divots. That would be like, that's as far as you would be comfortable going outside of having a nicely mowed area. I just want to kind of sense where your comfort zone goes.
So again, it's kind of multiple issues there. I would like to fill in the holes in the low spots, so we can get up and down that hillside, or somebody can get up and down that hillside, and then have a discussion about the expectation for maintenance and grass height, because I think it will be a significant effort to mow that area kind of on a regular basis. And if we're not mowing it, we'll really want to make sure we've kind of dealt with some of those divots, because you can't really see them right now if you're walking through. Does that answer
So the divots you'd fill in with soil and stones, or
We'd have to do some topsoiling, and some
Topsoil?
seeding, and some mulching.
plant some wildflowers?
But
just kidding.
Is it possible to do a site visit? I hate to say that, but I see the maps and everything. It's not three-dimensional.
Yeah, a
hate
site
to-
visit is very helpful, because I did
I
do
hate to
one.
impose that, but huh?
Another meeting.
Well, I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there. That's all.
Well, you're welcome to come with me and Juniper, and we do a site visit just about every day. We walk the other park. So, because she doesn't like to walk around the neighborhood.
Yeah.
Look, I think, Tom, you've done an excellent job summarizing the issues, the costs, and an action plan. There's no question that I am in favor of fixing the entrance, making it accessible, and opening the park, and then expanding it. Because I understand that we can't get Middlebury Fence Company, even if we had cash on the table, couldn't get them back as fast as we could open the park when we fix the entrance. I'm very much in favor of fixing the entrance and then expanding it. I think we can go east. I really do. I think that you're right, that we need to set expectations of what the city can and can't do if we expand it to the east. And I'm okay with that. This is an unusual and unique and I think very attractive dog park. This isn't the football field that's at Star Farm or down at the Burlington waterfront. It's more akin to what you see in Shelburne and that overgrown area there. This is going to be a fantastic amenity for the city of South Burlington, and I think it can be better. Obviously, the entrance has to be fixed. We're on it. I hope the council will agree with me that we should fix that right away. But I also think we should expand it to the east with the understanding that this is not going to be a mowed football field like you find in Star Farm.
Yeah, I don't think we wanted that.
No.
I mean, I think you want some of the up and down. That's what dogs like to run around in. Yeah.
So I agree with Councilor Cotto. With one additional comment, similar to Councilor Reilly, my spouse and I, when we walk our dogs, we don't like them going in long grass because we don't want the ticks. We don't want to have to filter through it. So as much as expanding east seems feasible, if the city's not going to mow it, I would almost want that to be a third section. But I think that's a discussion for another day. Let's fix the ADA thing. Let's open the park, and then let's figure out how to expand it in a thoughtful, reasonable manner. Down the road.
So are we talking about expanding it south as well?
the southeast is what I thought was talking.
Well,
And there's southwest.
there's a couple. I mean, if
There's-
you look at the map, the tan stuff is outline is what the DRB laid out, and the green is what is where the fence is now. Correct?
The green and the blue, yeah. Oh, green and
Yeah,
blue.
the two shades of green or blue or whatever. Yeah. And so we're talking about
There.
Yeah.
in there. But I think we were also talking about the flatter part at the top.
Yeah, there's three bites of the apple here. We can go, the flatter part of the top, we can get there. I think we can gain a third of an acre for $6,000, $6,600 by in the southwest corner, and I think we can go at a higher cost, but I think we can go east and gain up a lot of the acreage we lost. Again, understanding that this terrain is different, but setting expectations for both users and staff is important. And then I think the third question is whether or not you go further to the southwest to gain what is 0.08 acres with drainage. That's an additional cost above the $4,400. Okay, I mean, I certainly have my priorities, which may not be the priorities for the Committee of Common Area of Dogs, or my preferences. I shouldn't say my priorities, but it starts with fixing the gate, which I think we have to make the decision tonight to do, so we can set a timetable for getting this operational.
So to fix that and to increase it to the southwest corner, that's a total of $7,900, right?
Oh, I have to go back.
Yeah,
and look, but yeah.
1,300
Driving
to
in.
modify the front,
Tree, yeah.
the entrance, and then 6,600 from the Middlebury to add the 0.3 acres to the
Southwest.
southwest.
Yep.
And then to go to the northwest, you're saying that's going to take
Drainage.
more work. So the 4,400 is just the fencing, not the drainage and the.
That may be work that we can do, because it might just be a little bit of perforated pipe or something, but that is not an approved modification per the DRB, because we're in a class
Okay,
3
so we'd have to
wetland,
go
I
to the
believe.
DRB
So that might add
to
permitting.
say, so maybe that's something that we work on with the DRB and we do in the spring.
Yeah, number 5 is you gain the least amount of acreage, and it's only 4,400. It does involve drainage and it does involve the DRB. Whereas number 6, that's where you really gain the acreage, in the Tom's memo.
Oh, okay.
So
that brings it south, right?
East.
number 6 brings it east.
East.
And that's with the understanding Tom's concern for his staff and his equipment, our equipment that he's in charge of, comes with clear expectations of what Public Works is going to do to maintain that site. And I think that's a conversation we need to have with the Committee for Common Area of Dogs, so that we're all on the same page.
You skipped over figure 4.
Sorry, Shirley.
Yeah, the 4 is,
4 seems ready to go. 4's 0.3 acres. It'd expand. It'd be nice up there. And
okay.
3 and 4, yep. 3 and
Yeah,
4,
that was the 7,900.
Yeah.
Well, I think we definitely should do that ASAP.
Yep.
I think we should work on 6, understanding that it might take, we have to go through the DRB.
I don't know if we have to go through the DRB
Oh,
for 6.
for
It's
6
5.
we
We have
need
to go
for
through the
5.
DRB. We have to go to the DRB plus drainage for less than 1/10 of an acre. But 6, I don't think we need to go through the DRB unless Tom tells me differently. We just need to talk with the Committee for Common Area Dogs about what the expectations are for maintaining that trickier area to maintain.
I guess I'd like to have a longer conversation about sort of that area to the east, let's call it Area 6, just to make sure we're all on the same page there. If we're pulling in those drainage features within the park area, I don't know that that's actually included in what the fence company showed for Figure 6, as far as their recommended expansion that we worked with them to develop. So I think there should be some more discussion going east. But like I said in the memo, getting the gate ready, and then expanding in the southwest, I think those can be easily done. I would have to go back, and we're going to run everything, of course, past planning and zoning, make sure that they're on board with it. We don't need any other approvals, which I don't think we do until we start adding pipe. And then see if we can get Middlebury fence back this year, would be my hope, if
Well,
we're
that would be
doing
nice.
smaller pieces.
Well, at the very least, Tom, and you've heard my opinion on this, but I'll just say it publicly once again. We need Middlebury fence back to fix the entrance to make it safe and accessible, along with your team to change the footing. And I hope we do that. I hope you can use all your powers that you have to convince them to do that ASAP.
How soon can the fence company come back? Are they booked like 4 years out in advance, or?
They're generally booked. We got them from not this year to, well, what do you want? And we'll talk kind of time frame, let's say. So if I can get feedback tonight in a direction, we'll work with them this week to see what and when.
Did they have trouble drilling some of the holes for the posts at all?
Yes.
Because of ledge?
It's ledge.
And so do they have, would they have a special machine for that? Or?
They drill in, yeah. Per post, they charge us more when they hit ledge.
Okay.
And so that's the other piece of this I didn't get to. I was giving my quick overview. So we've spent the initial budget at this point. We do own extra materials, obviously, for fence, but those additional numbers in there are for the labor, to have them come back and install it. And now they kind of know better what to expect ledge-wise, too.
Okay.
So that, yeah, we have to identify a funding source for some of this. I mean, if it was just modifying the fence and some SurePack and things like that for $1,300, that'd be so much simpler. But if we were going to expand in other areas, we got to have a funding source for that as well.
Okay, but number 5 is the northwest corner. That you can do, right? I'm confused. I'm just trying to figure out, understand what.
Why don't we walk one by one through these with timing and budget? And
That would
get
be
your direction.
that would be really helpful.
And the original budget was how much, Tom?
What was we spent like 52 or 60 on fence. I think it was closer to 60 for the fence quote that we got.
60,000?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay,
For fence.
and that's been spent.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
But when we move things around, some of that fencing can be reused.
We still have materials left over. Yeah.
But even just, as you move and make a corner different. Yeah, okay.
Did you buy all the fencing for the original outline of the fence?
We still have the materials, yeah.
Oh, so you have the material for the full circumference, is what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, really? Oh,
But
okay.
It's the labor. It's the labor to dig the holes and assemble it.
And the machine.
And the machine.
Oh, well, that's helpful. I mean, so it's just labor, really. And
yeah.
and plotting it. Oh, that's better yet. Okay. So we've invested in the fencing. It's just sitting somewhere. So we need to put it in.
And it's nice fencing. It is really
It's beautiful. I mean, I think it's gorgeous. So that design was lovely. So want to take it through, and then we can.
So
As soon as
one we're going to
possible.
do with existing staff. That's what we're saying.
Recommendation 1 is replacing wood chips to crushed stone, and we can do that with existing staff. Yes.
Okay, great.
Check.
Tom, do you want to just walk through
Yep.
these?
Item 2 is just ensuring that the gates and their mechanisms are ADA compliant. Part of the ADA compliance is the surface and gate swing, things like that.
But it's where
We can do that on our own. There's no dollars there. That's just a making sure as we move forward.
Don't you have to move down the little click the levers to open the fences?
There's a range of height that the
Oh,
latch is
okay.
allowed to be, which it's within.
Yes,
at
but
the
you
moment.
can do that with existing. Okay.
Number 3 was the entrance, which is also figure 3. So that's just making it smaller, reducing the size of the entrance, moving some fence around there. That's $1,300.
And that's Middlebury. They have to come in and do it.
They have to come in and do that, yep.
Okay.
And so then we jump to the southwest corner. That's in the large dog area, kind of the bottom left, right? Southwest, in that nice flat mode area that you can see in the satellite image. That would be an expansion of about 0.3 acres, and that's about $6,600.
And that's the cost to Middlebury for installing the fence that we already own.
Yep, that's their estimate. Yep. And so I just want to be clear, if you look at the shape, it's not the original shape still, because we still have that large ledgy outcropping that kind of we're recommending to be avoiding.
The dark part.
That's right, yeah. So where my little arrow on this map says a steep hill comprised of ledge. I think is what I wrote.
Okay, so I was writing and not looking at your little hand on the picture. So can you take the hand and show me where we're talking about for number 4, please? Oh. Well, I'm sorry, but I'm.
Yeah, I just need to figure it
Yeah,
out.
no, it's hard to tell.
So I think it goes, Tom, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yep, like that, but a little
So
bit
it
larger.
includes those trees, so we get a little shade. That's nice.
I think
Okay.
it even goes lower. Goes further north, I mean.
Like
Yeah,
there?
yeah. Because there are flags out there. Are those flags
There are flags out there.
delineating
Yes. Yeah,
where the fencing will go?
yes.
All right.
Yeah,
Okay, so that's good.
but there were a week ago.
Yes.
To be clear, this one does not raise any concerns about permitting nor mowing or anything else. This one is relatively straightforward of the 3 expansions.
That's correct.
Great. This is the easiest to fight.
It is.
Okay, yeah.
Drainage issues.
No drainage, just that ledge that we're avoiding. So then we go to number 5. That's the northwest.
That's expansion in the small dog area.
Okay, and that just is that flat area that goes toward the sidewalk.
It's a small area. It's a known wet area. We can't go sort of as the original plan showed again because it's going over a ledge. That's kind of a drop off there.
Oh, okay.
Or we didn't believe we could easily. So that's why the fence got moved in originally. But yeah, that wasn't part of the recommendation. If council did want to expand, I'd want to talk about drainage just to make sure it's not wet.
Okay, and then that would require the DRB if it requires drainage.
Yes.
Okay, so number 5, maybe DRB. So that's put off till a couple months or something. You can't do it in the winter anyway, but you have the fencing, so that's good. Okay.
6.
Okay.
And then 6 is just an expansion to the east. Again, it does not follow what the fence company drew up and was in figure 6 does not follow that outline, which was in the original plan. It goes over to those drainage features, I believe. So we would want to talk more about that if it was council's wish to extend that way, both on where it's going to be, what are maintenance expectations, etc.
More.
Shirley.
Yes.
So I want to expand east. I support that, Councilor Cota, but I don't see that happening without a lot more thought and discussion on it. And so that's where I'd want to have that longer discussion to really understand the implications of having it be part of the current dog park and the maintenance and also what it would take to smooth out that land. So I'm not against having a dog park there in the future, but I want to open this current dog park and have that conversation down the road. That's me.
Okay, so that's expectations. So there's drainage, which would require the DRB, more discussion that would include the expectations of the maintenance, the mowing or whatever
And terraforming.
Right. Filling in the divots.
So to simplify, I think what we're saying is hopefully in partnership with Middlebury Fence, we can do 1 through 4 and open late fall. And then 5 and 6 over the course of the winter, we would work on and bring back for the committee and the council's discussion about how to achieve both what the engineers say is possible from a design and build construct perspective and a dollar figure.
Okay. So some of it we already know is $11,000. That's the estimate.
No, I'm not saying what the estimate is. I'm saying where we're going to find the funding.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
what it's worth, I like what the city manager just said, 1 through 4 as soon as possible, get it open, and then talk about 5 and 6 down the road.
I do too, but I do want to hear from Betty and Barbara or whoever else would like to speak from the dog park committee.
And
Or the
Carol
committee,
wants to speak too.
or whoever else would like to speak.
Right. And I would like a time frame on this. I don't want this to be in the future and 10 years later, we're still arguing whether we can mow it or not.
Yeah, I'm gonna be off the council after March. So
Oh, no. Last one of those.
You know, there's one like that in every crowd, isn't there?
Chairing this committee has been like a career at this point. I think one of the things I wish that Tom was able to do would be to put those different sections that you showed that could be added onto the map, all of it on the map, because I think we'd have a better perspective of it. I'm sorry, what? Yes. Yeah. So, because I think probably Carol might be a little more relieved, maybe not totally happy, but I think in looking at those different sections and looking at the little white flags I've looked at for 3 days in a row, there's part of the fence on the south side that's going to stay where it is. Is that right? That's what you've basically done. The middle of the fence on the south side would not change, right? You'd be bringing the eastern corner would go south and around to the east, and then the western corner on the south would also go over to the east and south, but not the middle part. Is that right?
So the recommendation we got from the fence company that we've brought forward tonight was to avoid that hill with the ledge right there where Jesse's got the mouse.
Right.
So it kind of bows in the middle there.
Yes. So that big green area is not going to be affected that much. It's going to be somewhat affected, but it wouldn't be all of it. So when we see a straight line going across there, that won't be what it looks like, right? The brown part on the south side goes straight across, and it won't be that. I just want to clarify that what you've got on your diagrams and what we saw on the posts, we saw little white flags on the posts, and there was a section between flags that looked like it would still be straight because you've got your gate to get in there too, to get in there with maintenance.
That's right.
So this is a little, I mean, and you said that last week, that this depiction is not what is actually what you're proposing. I say proposing, what you've put out there for options. They don't necessarily fit this grayish brown thing, right?
That is the originally proposed
That's right.
plan by the
Right,
DRB.
but we're changing it.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, and what you've done with flags and with those diagrams that you've shown us, that will change that on that southern border, correct? And I think that's an important piece for all of us to understand, that we're not, and I think we also know that would be an expectation. We'd be having to do some compromises with what was originally there. I have another question for Tom, because when before the fencing went up, there were, I don't know exactly what the equipment is, you call it, front end loaders, whatever it is. They dug a trench to put in, they buried drainage, and it went from along the parking lot, and it turned south around the perimeter of where the fence is right now. There is some drainage piping over there already, so you might want to talk to Adam, because
I'll have to look into anything like that, but I thought they were just kind of grading that area out to flatten it, but so I'm not sure what you're referring to there.
I'm sorry, what?
I'm not sure what you're referring to there.
There was drainage.
My involvement was after the fence was in.
I know it was,
Yeah.
but I know that there was drainage put in there, at least along the northern border, and it went around the corner. I drove by it several times a day while they were doing it. So anyway, I'm somewhat heartened with some of the comments you folks have made. And I can't speak for the committee because we meet next week, but I can just tell you, I really appreciate the time you've all taken to go over there and look at it and walk it. And Tim, I'd be glad to take you. You'd be my last last counselor to go over there with you. What?
Warmer than February.
Yes, yes, yes.
So we're not going to do anything at the top at the moment. What I call the top, but it's the south end.
Except on the
Except on the southwest corner. Okay. So
I think that's what Tom's
leveling that off to where we thought it was going to be, which is more like that.
The new fence is going to go like something like that.
Yes, but we're not going to
Right.
yet. Maybe when we add this. Oops.
So when we come back and talk to you about 5 and 6, we will give you an updated.
Okay.
drawing.
Yes, and I would appreciate it if, because our committee knows dogs and knows dog parks, and this is the 4th iteration of a design, and our committee has not been asked for any input on any of those iterations. So I would really appreciate it before any other changes are made, that our committee be given an opportunity to share why it is certain things we asked, certain things that we thought were important, that were not basically considered. So I would really appreciate it if staff would come back to our committee, not just go to the DRB.
Or when we have those discussions in the council this
Right.
November and December, that you come and you're present in the room with us.
Absolutely, and be able to have input before the final, that's before it's final, so that I feel that staff have gone and had to do a lot of work and done 4 different iterations, because I think in the beginning, the committee wasn't really involved in the design, or the layout, whatever you want to call it. We're certainly not construction people, but we certainly understand the design part of it. So I would just like us to be able to be part of that conversation before a final product is given
That's
for your
possible.
stamp of approval. So
Since we're going to have that discussion in
We
November,
will,
December.
and we need to, in terms of, expectations of users and, okay.
And I appreciate.
I mean, maybe my concern about the high grass isn't, as long as you post it or something and people know that that's potentially tick world, you can keep your dog out if you don't want ticks.
Ticks are everywhere.
I know,
You
I
can get them
know.
on the ground. But
Yeah, I know,
anyway,
I know,
I
but
understand. I really
You
appreciate
can be
your-
really careful, and our
I
dogs
know,
typically
I know.
don't get ticks.
And I just appreciate you saying that you'd like to have a time frame and all
Yes.
of that too. So thank you.
So what we're looking at then is 1, 2, 3, and 4, and an additional $7,900, and those dollars we don't have them in the budget, so I would recommend, if we're going to go forward with this, that they come out of our surplus for this year.
So moved.
Sure.
Second, if that's a
Yeah.
motion.
Any further discussion?
Discussion I'd say is this is a beautiful dog park, and this committee has a lot to be thanked for all the work that you did, and our DPW for building it. It is phenomenal. I can't wait until this asset is open and the community's going to love it, and I think it's going to complement everything that Common Roots has done up there, and I look forward to having a ribbon cutting ceremony at the dog park, another meeting. So let's do that.
Those aren't meetings.
All right.
You don't get paid for that.
Celebrations.
So we have a motion. Oh, I'm sorry, Barbara, excuse me.
So I just want to say the last time I was here, I talked about the perfect storm. And I met with some of you and talked about the perfect storm. And I just want to say, with this motion and with the requisite timeline and consultation with committee, the sun is shining instead of a perfect storm. So thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so that's a motion, and then we can talk about a timeline if you want to have that as direction. It's more specifics.
Did you say Carol wanted to talk?
Oh, I'm sorry. Carol, did you want to say anything?
I do. It's a practical question because we are a city of good neighbors, and the The dog park is beautiful in every way. So as we show the land to prospective brides and grooms, we have weddings booked into next year in 2024. And I spoke with Holly, and I've spoken to the Park and Rec committee. Can we have, and it's not for tonight's discussion, but can we have an understanding as Common Roots? We're thinking that when somebody is paid $3,000 and $4,000 to have a wedding on the land, that while they're in their party, there might be times that the dog park has to be closed because dogs barking while you're having your wedding ceremony could be really tumultuous. So Holly said, just bring it up to the council tonight. All I really need to know is who makes that decision if when someone is paid to have an event at the Wheeler Homestead and they're getting married and they're having a wedding party. Lots of dogs barking. I don't know what it'll sound like. It's a great park and we're glad to be friendly neighbors, but I think there could be a challenge to renting the land if there's dogs at a formal event, like a wedding or some similar event. So I don't know who makes the decision on that. But Holly and I have spoken about it. I just don't know who makes the decision.
So I think the decision to close a public park, would be a council policy. So I think when we come back with 5 and 6,
yes,
and talk about both the expansion but also the shared expectations about maintenance and operations, that could be part of that conversation.
That's what Holly guessed. She said, but
Yeah.
you better share with City Council. Yeah, and we're glad to be. I mean, you know, there's lots of events that happen up there that don't need the dog park closed, but I'm thinking when someone spends that kind of money on a wedding, that might be an issue. So we'll talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You give them enough cake and they don't bark.
There you
It's
go.
not a problem.
Filet mignon.
Yeah, flip over some filet mignon and they'll be totally satisfied. Okay, so we have a motion on the table. Are you ready for the vote?
Yes.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Great, that's a 5-0. And then we will expect to hear about the remaining 2, 5 and 6. When do you think you'll have a better sense of how long that might take? And because I'm thinking about that's more money, so we need to allocate potentially money, or at least discuss that. Can we carry money forward? We can, right? If we wanted.
Surplus, are you talking about?
Yeah.
Well, you can carry money forward. You can also just allocate it to the fund balance and then draw it down from the fund balance.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so there's plenty of money in here to do this. I mean, okay. So when do you think you might be back with a time frame?
We're going to call this week for items 1 to 4 because we want to get on the schedule if we can. I think we're going to have more discussion about 5 and 6 going forward here.
Okay.
So I don't have a timeline for that necessarily. I
Yes.
want to make sure we get the park to the point where we can open it.
Certainly.
Items 1 through 4 done.
Can we say, Tom, before that we would go both to the committee and back to the council before the end of the calendar year in preparation for doing the work when the snow melts?
Yes.
Good, perfect. Good. Okay, and then we'll just make sure we have a little fund balance to pay for it.
Thank you all. Thank you,
I
Tom.
can't spend
Thank
it
you,
all on
Betty.
daycare. Okay, I get it. All righty. Okay, moving on to item 12. This is this will be easy. The budget schedule. I'll move approval. We don't even have to present it. It sounded great.
Yeah, so there's not much different in this year's FY24 budget schedule from last year's FY23. Last year we combined CIP items with the general budget discussion, as well as we have three council meetings to present the budget. Each night will be something a little bit different starting in September. So we'll have a public safety night, and administrative services night, and library, and Public Works Night, all that fun stuff. So
I'm gonna love it. All
the
those
next
special meetings.
the next main council decision point will be at the next regular council meeting to talk about budget goals for FY24. Last year, when we went through that discussion, it's also when we close out the fiscal year for FY22, and we'll have the final surplus allocation discussion. Provided a little bit of an overview of sort of where we are in FY23 or in the current fiscal year, and what we're forecasting for increases next year. Of course, that's a forecast; it's a rough estimate at the time, but we can get you some of those numbers in order to maintain current services. What CPI will look like for our increases in salary costs, any healthcare cost increases that we know about, pension liability. If there's anything else council would like to have in front of them, let us know now in order to make your sort of initial decision on what those FY24 budget goals will be.
And are you saying the budget goals, that'll be on September 19th, right?
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. I will be out of state, so you will be chairing that, and I
Okay.
will try to join. Okay.
We need a motion?
Yeah, we need a motion to approve this?
So moved.
And a second? Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great. Cool. All right. So now we are a voting delegate for the Vermont League of Cities and Towns.
So town fair this year is Thursday, October 6th and Friday, October 7th. At the annual meeting of the league and Verb, we have a voting position. So if sometimes councils like to delegate who will vote for, who will be the voting representative for South Burlington.
Are you attending?
I will be there. I can do it, but if one of you wanted to attend and do it,
No, you can do it.
Yeah.
You would
Move to-
actually know how to vote.
I move
The
to
rest of it,
appoint
we would be
Jesse.
like,
Aren't you running that whole thing?
Yeah.
Aren't you in charge?
yes.
Right.
Okay.
Don't give
So
away
if you
power
could
like
approve
that.
me to be the voting delegate, that would be
I
great.
move that we approve Jesse Baker, city manager, as the voting delegate for the Vermont League of Cities and Towns Town Fair.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Sorry that took so long.
Any other business? Okay, so if there's no other business, we need to consider entering executive session for the purposes of discussing a real estate negotiation.
And I have a motion.
Yep.
I move that the council enter into executive session for the purpose of discussing the negotiation or securing a real estate purchase or lease options and to discuss the appointment or employment or evaluation of a public officer or employee, inviting in Jesse Baker, Andrew Bulldog, Paul Connor, and Colin McNeil, probably some by remote. That's it.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And we will not be coming back, so we will be adjourning after that.
We will.
Excellent.